All right, we're back. Episode 29 of Make Do Suburban Fireman Podcast. That's Sean Duffy. I'm Nick Peppard. We are joined today by our special guest, Jason, the Can Man Liska, out of Central Florida. Jason, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, brothers. Thanks for having me. It's a good thing we can do this again. It's been a long time since we've been able to hit the mic together and just shoot some shit and have some fun. So I'm glad to be here.
Hell yeah, man. So, yeah, we'll kind of dive right in, man. Give us a little bit of background and yourself. What got you into the fire service, where you're at today, the hobbies, long walks on the beach, spending hours in front of a mirror curling your mustache. I mean,
Well, that happens
that takes
naturally.
time. I mean, yeah,
That's natural. See,
it takes
there's no
time.
wax in it right now, so it's totally natural at this point. My story is simple and kind of boring, actually. I mean, I'm just a fat guy with a great mustache and a little bit of passion for the fire service. But I grew up, in South Florida, originally from Chicago. So go Cubs, go Bears. I don't care what anybody's opinion is. Green Bay is what it is. I know you're close, so don't take it personal. You're a transplant. You can't be a true Green Bay fan. Don't go that route yet.
True.
Don't go that route yet. But I grew up in the fire service thanks to my grandfathers. One was chief, one was a captain, North Riverside, Illinois, in the 50s and 60s, and then in the 70s when they retired and they moved on. They started sharing stories with me as I was growing up. And it was kind of cool to hear those stories, and it just piqued an interest in it for me. And then I had the benefit of kind of getting into radio as well with a family member, a sister in radio, who's been in radio as long as I've been alive. And growing up, I got to hang out in a radio studio and see morning shows produced, which she worked on, and got really close to that field. And as I grew up, I kind of followed the fire department path as a cadet or explorer, depending on your vernacular for it. And in the same process, right after graduating, I took an intern job at a radio station my sister worked at. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And I didn't stop volunteering for Palm Beach County. I stayed with it and just kind of pursued that route. Thought it would be great. I really love radio. It's a really good medium and just something that I was really cool at, really good at. It just kind of fit the mold for me. But then I also had a love for firefighting, and I met my wife in a firehouse. It was just what it was. And as we started getting more serious and realizing there was a life to be had and a future, I had to weigh options, and I knew that I could do radio. But then in the late 90s, it was no different really than now, I guess. You really have to work hard to pursue that avenue of being successful. And there's a lot of sacrifice that goes with it. I used to see people come in and out of the radio stations, middle-aged men at that point who had families that were, transitioning from one state to the next because they were in a job for 6 months and, oh, radio station got sold, so you're fired. Guess what? You got to go find a new job. I didn't really want that. And I still love the fire service. So I ended up getting into dispatching not long after that, and then left the the radio part of it, and dispatched for a couple of small departments in Palm Beach County. And then ended up, while I was volunteering, working for Palm Beach County as a dispatcher. And it was a natural transition to the field when we moved up here. And I finally got hired by Putnam in 2000 and did 8 years, great years with them, and spent an awesome amount of time learning in a rural EMS environment that eventually graduated to being part of the fire service as a whole package. And, I cut my teeth as a medic there. And around 2008, I got a little squirrely and wanted to see some change, and it was time to get off the box. I mean, 8 years, it seems like a life sentence, in a penitentiary to some, but it was time to get on the big red truck. And then I transitioned over to Lake. And, I will say this, I never thought that I would pursue the avenue I'm in now with the podcasting and the mentoring and the teaching that I do. But I had a hiccup in my career, like some do, and it was a hiccup that almost cost me everything. And I became very jaded towards the fire service. And it wasn't like I had to be. It was just a personal choice, and I wasn't looking at the bigger picture as to why I was feeling that way. It was because I was well, the little bit of success I had in Putnam kind of carried over, and my ego kind of took over. And I thought that I could do things that I really wasn't ready to step out and do. And they weren't ready for me to do either. I needed to learn my job and be good at my job. And the experience behind me was just that. So I didn't really appreciate what I had until it was almost gone. And then I faced some challenges and almost lost it. And, my job, that is. And when it was all said and done, I decided to turn things around and build my career. A little late in life, mind you, but I did, and got my FO1, FO2. Ended up going back to college, got on the lieutenant's list, got promoted, and it was all because when you realize the one thing that you truly love and that you put to the side and don't realize you're damaging that opportunity to grow because you're letting ego and pride swallow you whole. Basically, you're owned by it. You're never going to succeed in life if you don't take a step back and accept humility and appreciation. So thanks to some good mentors and people in my life that pushed me and challenged me and reminded me what it was like to be at the bottom and start clawing their way back to the top. Here I am, and that's where the Can Man came from. And it's kind of cool getting back into the radio side of it because I get to do it my way and have a little fun with it, and that's that. And so I've been very happy with the process. Sitting number 2 on the battalion list right now, which is a significant accomplishment. Teaching for Kaiser, teaching when I can at the fire college, getting to travel. It's been a blessing. So, 25 years into year 26, married, 4 kids, 4 wonderful assholes, as I like to call them, that still live under the roof. God bless them. They're good kids. That's the story is what it is. It's exciting, but it's not. It's exciting for me. But the one thing I love most is working with the new firefighters coming in and working even with the senior firefighters that may have lost some perspective as well, and just sharing my story and experience and trying to find where their story needs to go towards, what their next step needs to be, and just mentoring, because I had a lot of great mentors even when I was at my lowest point. So I think it's equally important to pay it back. So that's the whole purpose behind that, rising from the ashes and growing into what we do today. Did I lose you?
Nope, we're here.
I was going to say, that went silent. Let me check my board here.
No,
Okay,
you're good.
we're good. We're good.
So, that's kind of a roundabout way to get into the fire service. That's kind of the radio route is not one you typically kind of start with and end up in the fire service. But that's kind of it's what part of what makes you. It's kind of unique to your journey, and I think it's kind of cool that you're doing stuff with the obviously the Can Man podcast and still getting to enjoy some of that element of radio. And I'd listen to you dispatch too. I'm just going to put that out there. You'd have a very soothing voice if I had to listen to you dispatch. It would probably beat most of the dispatchers that we listen to collectively. I think I think dispatch is definitely its own cup of tea, and unfortunately, they don't always get the love that they need, or the overworked and underpaid and expected to keep up with a lot sometimes. So,
I said this once before in a podcast that I did with, I don't think it was a podcast. It was a group meeting, actually. Somebody brought up that dispatchers can be very frustrating at times. And okay, so there's some truth to that. But what people don't forget, and this is just one perspective, dispatchers sit in a room for 12 hours, 8 hours, however long their shift is, and literally get maybe a 15-minute break every few hours to step outside and do whatever they're going to do, or a lunch break, or whatever the case may be. But when they're in that room, they go from phone call to phone call if they're answering the phones. They go from call to call if they're sending units to something or responding to units on the radio on a different TAC channel. They don't really get a lot of downtime in that process. And that's something I realized after, thinking about why are dispatchers so frustrated and looking for a little bit of support from the first responder community. And it's because we kind of have it a little bit different. We can take some downtime in between calls. We can put the truck out of service for a minute or two to reset while we're stocking, have a chance to talk about things. We're not necessarily going call like they are, and where they can't decompress. We kind of can, depending on the circumstances. So when I understand I understand people getting frustrated, and even I do too, but you got to look at their job. They're stuck in that room for 8 to 12 hours, and it's just nonstop until they get to go home. And that might be where they decompress, but it really needs to be said that our dispatchers deserve a little more credit than they get.
Truth. Yeah, no, it's honestly, man, you look at the turnover in a lot of dispatch centers too. That's the other thing, we get frustrated because there's always new dispatchers coming through, and they're trying to learn, and they're kind of getting trial by fire, literally sometimes.
Very much so.
And no, it's definitely kind of the part of the public safety, domain that we sometimes forget about, and forget that they're the first ones that are trying to make sense of chaos sometimes, and it's they don't always get it right, but neither do we either. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we don't always get it right either. So, but that being said, I would still listen to you dispatch. You have a very soothing voice. So,
it's a voice that only a mother could love, right? Or you, even, for that matter. It is what it is. Yeah. Or Sean, he's just sitting there quietly pondering how he's going to pounce me later. It's okay. I know
Oh,
it's coming.
he's taking in that the stash and the voice too. So don't want to fool you.
Yeah, this was maple syrup, Molson, and flannel. 3 weeks in Canada. I highly recommend it. Okay, that was 2017, and the journey began then, and here we are today.
Here we are.
You
So
forgot to
yeah.
say
Hey, a
Hey.
boot? What are you talking about? You want to play some hockey? You're closer to Canada. Well, both of you are closer to Canada than I am.
Yep, hour and a half.
Yeah,
Boom.
isn't that wonderful? That's wonderful. Best strip clubs ever. Well, did I say that? Okay. Well, honey, don't worry about that one. It's okay.
Radio edit.
Yeah, we're not editing shit. It is what it is.
Yeah, no, there's no editing.
No, once we hit the mic and the hot button, we're done. It's going.
That's right. No takes backs.
No regrets.
Not even a single letter.
Not even one. Not even one.
Not even one.
Not even.
All right.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Nick has planned, but you brought up something there that I was originally going to go into later in the show, but since we're here, I'm just going to bring it up now. You mentioned mentoring and being involved in training newer firefighters and everything like that. Obviously, this is not a new thing for anybody who's been in the fire service a while, experiencing those individuals coming into the firehouse and doing things like that. And, there's obviously some challenges with it, right? Like I can tell you right now that from when I went to the academy, it's probably significantly different. You know, I've only been on the job 18 years. So imagine how different it is for somebody like you going into your 26th year, right?
So in the FRS, it's 23 and a half. If you count the dispatch time starting in 97, we're right at, total 25, 26 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to pick your brain and see what kind of changes have you seen throughout your career and how challenging can that be, especially in a company officer role when you are in charge of mentoring those individuals or training them and trying to get them in line with what your organization wants, plus going the extra mile, right? Giving some of your personal wisdom and nuggets from trainings that you attended outside of the organization.
That's a very loaded and 10-part question that we're going to answer in segments. All right. So let's see. When I got into the fire service, you still had the mentality of, you're the probie, shut the fuck up and do your job. You're better seen and not heard. And if you're seen, you better be doing something, because if you're not, then, guess what? You don't have pride in your job and you're probably not the guy we want. Okay. So I can tell you that watching that over the first maybe 5 to 10 years of my career, and even in the early days when I transitioned over, it wasn't a bad thing. It was actually quite a refreshing thing to see that the level of pride taken in maintaining our apparatus, maintaining our trucks, was significant. There was a lot of pride in waxing and washing and keeping things shiny and making sure that you had a basic understanding of pride and ownership, as Chief Lasky would say. And that being said, if you don't exercise that, then what kind of firefighter are you going to be when you show up on a scene and you're expected to pull line off of a truck, you're expected to throw a ladder, you're expected to force a door, go inside, do a search? If you can't get the simple foundational principles down of what it takes to get that truck operating and looking professional, then you might not act professional when you get on scene, and you'll look like a buffoon or a group of buffoons when you're trying to do your job. Now, so as we transition into, let's just say, the newer generations, I can tell you that mentality may still exist, but it's a minority mentality of the shut the hell up and do your job mentality. And one of the things that helped me understand the reason that's not as impactful today is because people learn differently. And maybe we didn't address that early in our career. Maybe it was just a one size fits all mentality in the fire service that worked in some cases and maybe weeded out the bad ones in other cases. But now I think, as a company officer, it's incredibly frustrating sometimes when you're trying to convey a thought and you're not being received in the way that you would hope. And so I see it in a lot of company officers where they just shut down and they're done, and they just want to get it across and walk away and call it a failure if the process doesn't succeed. So one of the biggest challenges I had to overcome, and I will say that, conflict resolution in college helped me with that, was learning how to read people, understand them. And that's as simple as just getting to know them before they walk through the door of your station. So when I'm assigned a probie, if I don't see them in school when I'm teaching probie class, I expect, like we do department wide, for them to come to the station and introduce themselves and sit down and meet everybody that they're going to be working with. And that's an opportunity to get to know them, because you don't know how someone ticks, you're not going to be able to teach them, because you're going to do it one way and not to adapt to the way they need it. And that's not a foreign concept. It's not a bad thing. It's important to understand, as a mentor, as an instructor, it is not a one size fits all process. You have to learn how to get someone to adapt to a way of thinking that's foreign to them. And the only way to do that is to truly get to know them, so you can identify strengths and weaknesses and characteristics that maybe need some tuning. And that's a process that takes time and patience and comes with a tremendous amount of frustration at times. But it's staying the course that matters when you're doing it. And sometimes consistency pays off, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you have to have those hard conversations. And I think the other side of the equation is sometimes people aren't willing to have those tough conversations with their recruits or their probationary firefighters at the company officer level, because they want them to succeed, but they're not willing to call them out on their weakest points, where that's an opportunity for them to understand, okay, if I'm not good here, well, instead of chastising me and yelling at me and berating me for that, what can you do to make me better? And it happens even above me sometimes, where I'm not saying my chiefs are bad in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying, your chiefs have to call you out as an officer. Sometimes you screw up, sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes you're not meeting the mark. And it's accountability, that where it comes down to, it's accountability. And that's something you have to instill in a lot of the generation now that's coming through the door, because they grew up like we did, playing video games and living on a screen that we didn't live on until we were later in life. And so they're great at certain things, not great at other things. And again, it all comes down to knowing what makes them tick. So that's important. If you're going to be a mentor, if you're going to be a company officer that works with new firefighters, you have to accept the fact that they're not going to be aligned with the same mentality that you were faced with when you walked through the door. And you have to be able to address that. And for them to succeed, you instill the same principles, but you have to do it in a way that they can identify and understand with. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's a necessity, because we want people to perform. We want people to show up and learn. And like I tell the probies I've had recently, I just want you to be good at the basics before you stop worrying about the advanced stuff, before you start going into the concepts of USAR or anything outside of the norm. Before you leave the station, you need to know how to pump a truck, because my guys drive right out of school. We don't have a driver position, and some stations don't have a lieutenant. You need to understand how to work that radio and make command decisions, even if you only have 6 minutes on the job. These are requirements. You need to understand that. And you got to learn how to multitask, which is not everybody's. In some cases, they can thrive at it. And in some cases they don't, because it's not the multitasking they're used to. And I got to take back some comments I've made in the past about how great they are at multitasking, but sometimes, depending on the task, they're just overwhelmed. And so you have to be persistent with it, and hopefully they adapt to that way. And it takes time. And I only get 20 shifts, so it's a lot to cram into 20 shifts. It's a ton of stuff to cram into 20 shifts. So realistically, it's a great role. It's a great process, but you have to believe in it. You have to understand it, and you have to set a path for them. And you have to do it with patience and persistence, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think you answered that question well. And, I mean, I think that's also a two-way street, right?
Okay.
What I mean by that is I think that we do, I shouldn't say we, but some fire academies do a poor job of providing expectations for individuals of what they are going to expect when they show up, right?
Okay.
So almost like the whole, well, my officer should teach me everything, and if if they're not asking me, I'm not going to tell them, right?
Right.
Whereas I think for like somebody who's new in an organization, you have to take that initiative too. Like, help your company officer out a little bit, and come
Right.
to them and say, "Hey, it's been a while since I've done this. Can we refresh on it?" Or, "I've never done this," or, no one's shown me this. I saw this article or post or whatever. I'd like to talk about it, pick your brain about it for a little bit, like engage in that. And I think we kind of take that away from people sometimes, because we tell them that, like, hey, shut up, don't talk unless you're spoken to, type deal.
Right.
And just do all the chores, which, again, not all bad things, but time and place, right?
Right.
So it's a two-way street for me of earning respect both ways, right? Like, if you want your
Mm-hmm.
company officer or the people you work with to respect you, you have to earn that. And some of the ways you earn that is by humbling yourself and realizing, like, hey, I have a very limited knowledge. And even what I think I know, I probably still don't know a whole lot. Right. So let me take the advantage and start, this person that I'm with every third day or, whoever, let me take their nuggets. And you don't always have to agree, right? Like we're not going to agree on everything. That's fine. But there is value in having conversation.
Of course.
Right? So at least I've seen that throughout the years where the probationary firefighters coming in are very shy and timid and afraid to ask because they don't want to get yelled at, or they think that their only job showing up to work is to clean everything and stay busy. And a large portion of that gets lost because they make themselves so busy, right? That they don't have that communication with the crew. They don't have that interaction. They're not asking the questions that need to be asked. And that's very hard on a company officer. How do you manage that?
So let's do this. All right. One of my affiliations, and I have not been as good as an affiliate as I want to be and should be, but I am a part of the NFFF, the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. I'm one of the state advocates here in Florida, and very proud of that as well because of the mission and the purpose behind what we do and the education that we put out there to help develop leaders and to address critical areas in the fire service, including line of duty deaths. Pardon me. Tripped up there for a second. My apologies. But line of duty deaths, which is something that we're 23 so far for 2023, which is scary. I got the notification, I think it was this morning, and I save every one of those. I don't erase them because that is a purpose. There's a purpose behind not just sharing it, but it leads you to NIOSH in a sense, where now you can, when that paperwork is filed and everything is done from the NIOSH report, whether it's a year from now or 2 years from now, you can then research and go back onto why what happened. But to the point, so the NFFF, we do the 16 life safety initiatives, and I'm sure you're familiar with them. Number 4 is empowerment. So when did it become uncool to empower your firefighters, even your recruits, to speak up? And when did it become a bad thing to empower them even if they not sure what they're seeing, but the way I address this is if you see something that isn't right, say something before something happens. Because remember, as a company officer, when you roll up on a fire, you're multitasking 30 different things at one time. It's the 360, utilities, hazards, rescue. Where am I putting my line? What do I need my second due to do when they show up? What are the priorities I need to align? And that's all got to be done quickly in rapid fire succession here, as well as I'm moving around the house at a rapid pace, trying to identify the hazards, secure utilities, get all that stuff done. What if I miss something that the probie might have seen? Do I want them to be afraid to say something to me, or do I want them to say, hey, Lou, something doesn't look right here. That roof's sagging. There's something not going good. Maybe we need to rethink our approach, because I might say we're going to go right here, go through the door, do this with the line. We're going to break off. Then while you're doing your thing, I'm going to go do my thing real quick. Point being, if we don't empower them to speak up, then we're going to fail them. We're going to fail them tremendously, and we're going to fail the whole process in general. And that's important. So empowerment matters. And I think when you talked about knowledge hoarding, that happens often. And I don't understand why. I don't understand why it isn't important to share knowledge. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm sitting next to 2 guys who have a high level of fire intelligence, and I like to think I have some as well. And I like to think I make, good decisions, even if they're not always right. I learn from them. But giving that knowledge is important. It's equally as important as empowerment. You've got to make them feel as if they're part of the crew, and you can't just beat them down every day and expect them in a year to walk away a better person, because if you do that, they're going to be disgruntled. You've got to give them the time, and as much time as you have to give them, to make it work. And that includes empowering them and showing them a path.
Yeah, this is all I'm going to say, and I'm going to turn it over to Nick. With that empowerment, I personally, and this is just my opinion, take it for whatever it's worth, I feel it's equally important to share your failures as it is your success.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you go around, you start like puffing your chest, like I'm badass, I'm good at everything. Like, oh, you know nothing, I know everything. There's going to come a time where you fuck up, right? And everyone's going to be like, oh man, I thought you were supposed to be like the guy, right? So moving forward and everything, like when we're doing this and we're sharing knowledge and everything else, share your failures. Hey man, look,
yes.
I'm not an expert. I have failed many, many times. I've probably failed more than I've been successful, but here is what I've learned. and this is why I feel the way I do. And I don't want you to step in that hole that I had, or I want you to step over that hole that I stepped into, right? Like, I want you to be able to navigate that. So I think a lot of people, they let their ego get in the way, and they don't want to open up and share those failures. But that, to me, is one of the best learning experiences, especially with somebody coming in with limited to no experience in the fire service. They have to know those things, right?
They depend on you.
They depend on you, and it can't just be all sunshine and rainbows, right?
No.
You have to be able to tell them, like, look, man, you could be the most well-trained person there is. You can take every class that we offer you. You can go to all the outside classes you want, but you are going to fail. That is reality.
Of course you are. Yes.
So how you recover from your failure is going to define how successful you'll be later on. And I think that's, we got to do a better job of putting that out there to people.
I couldn't agree with you more. When you think about sharing your failures, you're not showing weakness. You're showing appreciation and respect. You're demonstrating a level of humility that I think doesn't exist as much anymore, because people are afraid of being branded as fuck ups or degenerates or whatever the case may be. I was sitting with two firefighters yesterday, two awesome lieutenants, two men I respect, as we were training our recruits on a Sunday, which, you know, people might say, well, that's a foreign concept, train on a Sunday. Well, why not train on a Sunday, a Monday? It doesn't matter what day. If you're on shift, there's an opportunity to do something. It doesn't matter what it is, right? And one of the first things that one of the officers said, and piggybacked by all of us, is, look, you're going to make mistakes here. You're going to screw up, and we're going to be a little hard on you at first. And we're going to try to motivate you, do what we have to do, put our loud voices on to get things going. But let's explain to you that we've been in your shoes. We've made this mistake or those mistakes. We will continue to make these mistakes at times, maybe not the repetitive aspect, but we will continue to make mistakes because we're human. You don't brand someone a fuck up just because they make mistakes. You brand someone a fuck up if they don't change their way, if they don't modify their behavior, if they don't conform to the need. What you need to realize is that you're as fallible as anyone else. It doesn't matter what the bugle on your collar count or the bugle count on your collar is, or your role as a senior firefighter. You're just a human being, and you got to learn that it's okay to screw up. Just make up for it. Don't be afraid to screw up. You're muted, Nick.
Yep, there we go. No, I'm just sitting here making notes, man, listening to you guys talk, and so true. I can tell you that, you know, being willing to own your mistakes is huge. And, you know, in the fire service with a bunch of type A people, sometimes it's hard for us to humble ourselves and say, you know, I screwed up. You know, and I can tell you that I look back over my, you know, 18 years in the fire service, and I look at some of the things that, you know, the mistakes I've made along the way, and how that sometimes pride and ego gets in the way. And certainly whether it's as, you know, a firefighter, you know, senior firefighter, to someone new coming in and how you treat them or talk to them, or as a new officer or things like that. Sometimes, you know, we get it wrong. And I can tell you that, you know, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned over the last few years is just, like you said, a little ounce of humility, saying, hey, you know what? I screwed up. I screwed up. And it goes a long way, being humble and being able to say that you don't have all the answers. And that I think there's this mindset, especially when you talk about like senior guys, and like, you know, you look at your maybe it's a driver or it's a, you know, officers and stuff, that they have to have all the answers, that they have to, you know, kind of have it all figured out. And the reality of it is, like, that's not the case. You know, when you put on a tough guy front all the time, you know, eventually people are going to stop coming to you with questions or problems, because they feel like, you know, you're kind of, it's grandstanding. It's this, you know, I'm in charge, I'm, you know, or I'm the senior guy, listen to what I have to say, I have all the answers. And even if you don't say that, if you don't allow them to make mistakes, and you don't have grace when they do make mistakes, and take those teachable moments and invest in those, you know, in those relationships and in those, you know, development, you know, the development of those people, then the message you're sending by your actions is that you don't care, or that you, you know, and even if that's not your intent, the message that's being sent by kind of like trying to always have all the answers or being unwilling to bend or say, hey, I screwed up or whatever. Getting down to the root of like, you're not an infallible human being. You are a human being that makes mistakes just like they are. You just got more time on. And I think that's the big thing is like, hey, I'm going to try to teach you not only what to do, right, to be successful, but I want to take some of the lessons the things that I've learned the hard way and teach you how to avoid some of the pitfalls that I've kind of stepped in, if that makes sense. And when you're talking about mentoring people, being real is a big deal, because if they feel like you're inaccessible to the wall there, that you're this tough guy and you're trying to come across as the know-it-all or the guy that has all the answers, they're not going to open up. They're not going to be willing to kind of follow your lead, if you will, and accept that mentorship. And that's the thing about mentorship, right? Is we have an obligation to mentor our new members coming in,
Mm-hmm.
but it's only mentorship if they accept it, right? If they want that mentorship, really, truly, it is. I mean, let's because what is mentorship? It's one thing to coach, right? I can sit here and coach and teach and instruct, but mentorship is a two-way street, kind of like Sean alluded to earlier. And it is one of those things where there has to be some acceptance. And if I want them to accept it, I have to be real. I have to be vulnerable. I have to be willing to show, hey, don't do this because this is the end result. And on the flip side, the person has to be coachable. They have to be teachable. They have to be willing to receive that mentorship. And that's the one thing I will say that, it's one thing to direct information at somebody, but it's a whole nother thing when they receive that information willingly, because they know that you care, because they know that you're real, because they know that you're not trying to put yourself out there as the end all be all in the fire service. And this is how everything, they see the realness and the rawness of you as a human being, not just, you, the lieutenant or the captain or the chief or whatever. There has to be some human aspect to that. And there has to be some relationship building. I think to me, like, when I look at mentorship, you have to have some relationship building there for that to be the case. And
so, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that's, I think the difference, if you look at coaching versus mentorship, mentorship in my mind is always more of a two-way relationship type thing, where I'm not just telling you what to do, right? You're coming to me because you're confiding me, you're opening up in me, you're being vulnerable with me. And I'm kind of passing along some of not just the skill sets, but some of the soft skills too, some of the personal stuff that is different than, like, anybody. I can coach a basketball team and invest in kids and coach them and teach them how to play the sport.
Right.
But if I want to teach them and mentor them and help them be better people, that requires investing beyond just the game itself. And I think that's what I'm getting at, I guess, with the fire service is it's one thing to teach the job. It's a whole nother thing to teach them how to be better people.
So 3 things I want to hit on there. We'll hit on grace in a minute, because that's a really important word. Okay. An important process, how you demonstrate it. And there's a reason I'll share that. But let's go back to mentoring, and let's say mentoring and coaching, put them side by side. They can cohabitate together. They can definitely work together. But I think that mentoring is more of a deep process. Like you said, it's relationship building, and it's exposing your greatest weaknesses in some cases to help someone be better than you. And that's something that, and I'm going to say this as humbly as I can. You get these new recruits who latch on to you, or latch on to other lieutenants who are a phenomenal group, and they all say the same thing to those lieutenants: we want to be like you one day. And it's like, no, you don't. You want to be better than me. I want you to be better than me. I want to see you maybe be my chief before I retire, if I stay another 10 or 15 years, or you could be my battalion chief for that matter, or you could be a peer of mine as well and have a far greater amount of experience and coursework behind you that maybe I don't have. And it's okay. And I have a lot of peers that have a lot more experience than me, and there's nothing wrong with leaning on them. It's a mutual respect, it's appreciation, and it demonstrates a level of, I think, a level of interest that far too many people don't understand the value of. Okay, because again, coaching, it's pushing them forward and giving them the support they need to succeed, even when they're down. But mentoring involves you giving of yourself. It involves you, basically exposing yourself in ways that people are very uncomfortable with, because they think that if you present as weak, you're not as good as a leader as the next guy who walks around with his chest puffed up and he's perfect, right? No, you need to be in the process or the mindset that mentorship involves a long-term relationship, because it can go in 10 different directions depending on the path they want to go. But you should be able to have that relationship started. Now, the other thing, grace, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was sitting at OFC and I was sitting across from Chief Lewis, Walt Lewis, and amongst others like him, I picked his brain, his ideas. How do you be good at your job if you get elevated to chief level, a battalion chief, district chief, whatever? And one of the first things he said to me was grace, demonstrate grace. And that's important too, even as a lieutenant, because you can't be knee jerk with every situation when problems happen. You have to identify them. You have to be able to evaluate them. And before you knee jerk, you knee jerk, you might not solve the problem at all. You might just deter the problem off for a time being. And guess what? It's going to happen again, but maybe at a greater level. So you have to demonstrate grace and patience and civility and tact. And remember, as another good mentor of mine said, this is a young man's or a young man or woman's career that you're managing. So if knee jerk is the way you're going to go, then that's the way you're going to act. And it's going to be, it's going to go 50-50, maybe 60-40 in the opposite direction you want it to. But if you demonstrate a little grace and appreciation for the fact that they came to you or they're asking you to solve a problem that they created, take that time to do that. Don't just jump in head first and assume that your battle head reaction, you're banging your head against the wall and showing them this has to be done this way. No, show them why, explain to them why after you get all the facts, and then demonstrate that grace by that process. And that, I think, is important. There was one other thing you brought up, and I got a little off track. We talked grace, we talked about mentorship, and I'll come back to it. It'll come to me, but I'm going to hand it back to you guys.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, I think too, when we talk about we kind of circling back a little bit to the expectations with new people coming in, and how we approach them.
Okay.
I think a lot of it comes down to department culture too. I think culture actually plays a huge part in how we handle our new people, because there are departments where the culture is like you mentioned earlier: shut up, sit in the corner, don't talk until you've been here for 10 years, and then we'll let you know when it's okay to pipe up. There are cultures that exist like that. I have worked in cultures like that, where it's like the new guys are like they're expected just to be cleaning stuff all the time, and we're more focused, and we've had this conversation before, they're more focused on the toilets being cleaned and the coffee being made than they are on their actual skills of the job. And so that does exist. And then the flip side, I think there are cultures now that have swung the other way where it's almost too laissez-faire,
Okay.
where people come in the door and there's almost no guidance, where it's like, hey, just do whatever just do whatever. Like, here's some basic stuff, get this stuff done. And it's almost like there's no incentive to earn anything, because it's like, oh, you've arrived, you're here, you've arrived. And we don't make a big enough deal about like the process of development, and we don't use the probationary period for what it should be intended for, which is to develop and hopefully come out the other end a better person, a better firefighter, a better medic, whatever. And it's almost, we talk about pencil whipping training and things like that, and that happens on the flip side the other way too, where it's like, just pencil whip it, everything's cool, welcome to the club, here's your sticker and your t-shirt. And like, you see these extremes, those are both cultural extremes, obviously. And a lot of departments find themselves in the middle, but like just simple things like expectations on, do we put more emphasis on cleaning toilets, or do we put more emphasis on pulling hose and masking up quickly and being into the job? Do we put more emphasis on checking boxes and target solutions, or do we put more emphasis on actual job, skills and building the important things, search, fire attack, things like that, ventilation? Do we put more emphasis in the fire part of the job, or do we put more emphasis in special ops or EMS or whatever, all these programs? I mean, where is the focus of the department? And I'm bringing all this up to say this. I mean, when you have a new person coming into a fire department, a lot of times they don't know what to expect, right? Or maybe they have very limited expectations, especially if they haven't been clearly put out there during the recruit process, or maybe they don't know anybody on the inside. Like, I think that's that's one of those things where if you come in the door and you don't really know a whole lot, right, and this is your first fire job, you're gonna basically, more often than not, most people are gonna simulate to the culture that they come into. Most people are gonna simulate, and in a lot of cases, not even question the culture, whether it's bad or not. It could be a very toxic culture, but they assimilate to that. And I've seen this in departments where people 2 years on the job and they already have a shitty attitude towards training. Like, oh, I'm not going to train unless they pay me to do it, or I'm not going to do it unless they make me do it, or screw this, we got to go to this stupid call. Like you're 2 years on the job and they already are talking like they got 20 years on, like, screw this place, screw management, like, how do you go from a brand new firefighter to having that shitty of an attitude in 2 years, if not for cultural influence of the people that are, and I think that when we talk about expectations, there's formal expectations, right? SOPs, SOGs, our standard operations and kind of how we do things, right? The way our fire department does things. But then there's informal cultural expectations too, right? You learn real quick that if this coffee ain't made by 10 minutes to shift change, I'm going to get my hand slapped. It's that whole hand in the cookie jar thing. You get your hand slapped enough, you go, okay, this is more important. And what I'm saying is, like, if you are constantly being beat up for not cleaning toilets good enough, or coffee's not made, or this or that, but then there's never any ever any emphasis placed on training. Like, if I do something bad on a call, right, and I screw it up, and I know I screwed it up, but everybody's just high-fiving, hey, we whatever, and that's the mindset, is we kind of just brush it off and it's not addressed. What are we involuntarily teaching people? That it doesn't matter what I do on the fire ground, I could kill somebody, that's cool. But if the coffee's not made by 10 minutes to shift change, you're a piece of shit, and the new guy's a piece of crap because they don't know how to do this or that or whatever. And that's the problem I have, is when we start looking at, expectations, I think it is very much organizational driven, culture driven. Where do we put our emphasis? Is there consistency across the board in how we're enforcing stuff? Is it more important that we figure out what's for lunch every day than it is that we train? Is it more important that we, hey, you get guys that all the time, like, why do we have to go do this drill? We did this last month or whatever. And if that's the mindset, and that's allowed to permeate in an organization, right? And that goes to chief officers, company officers, senior guys, because these people learn these behaviors, right? These firefighters come in the door and they learn these behaviors, and they learn what's acceptable. They learn what's not acceptable. And even without us saying a single word, sometimes we are teaching good and bad behaviors just by what we emphasize, just by the way we approach them. And it's like this, you get a new guy that comes in and maybe they're struggling with throwing ladders, but we're just trying to pencil with the training drill. So get out there. They could have sucked at it, but we're going to give them credit, and we're not going to circle back around and try to fix that problem. It's still a problem, but we've created this false sense of security, like, oh, I did good enough, I got good enough to get by, I got credit for it, I got training just like everybody else. And it creates this kind of this mindset of, it's that standardization of deviance, right? It's that kind of, I've got away with this for so long, and now, like, it bites me in the ass, and everybody's like, oh, what happened? Well, you've developed this mindset in these people from the very word go, because you don't emphasize the things that really matter, because you put more emphasis on things that are, maybe more cultural, social things than actual job stuff. And, fitting in is more important than being proficient. And so, like I said, man, that's, for me, like, that's one of the big things I look at is, what are we doing as organizations, as officers, as senior firefighters, as senior, fire service members, to teach these folks, and set a good example from the first day that they come in the firehouse. Because if they come in and they get jaded, if they're jaded in 2 years from doing the job, something's wrong. If we've created this mindset towards training and towards the fire side of stuff, or whatever it may be, or towards doing any extra work, where that's acceptable, that becomes the norm in the firehouse, I think that plays just as big of a role in, the direction that these people's career go as anything else. And so I guess I say this, say all that to say this, as mentors, if we got to be careful what message we're sending, even without saying anything. Sometimes, like if they see us bitching and moaning about the job all the time, if they hear us bitching and moaning about training all the time, if the senior guys in your firehouse and the officers and the chiefs are constantly basically just pencil whipping stuff and just, or like I said, putting more emphasis on the social side of the firehouse, i.e., clean this, do this, don't talk, make coffee, if that's where our focus is, we're more focused on t-shirts than we are on competently being able to search a building, or being able to vent a building, or perform fire attack, or being good firefighters and good medics, and whatever else we do. Really it comes down to put your money where your mouth is, right? Put your focus and your attention where it really matters. And not saying those other little things don't have a place, but I think that when we get so focused on that kind of stuff, and lose focus of the big picture of why we're here, that's when you run into problems. That's when you run into, and then you have people that are 5 6 years in that they came in excited to be a firefighter, and now they are just here to collect a paycheck. They bitch all the time. They train when they have to. And if someone goes to training outside, like on their own time and dime, you're an idiot. Like, I wouldn't go unless the department's going to pay me, or you're just a nerd for reading that trade magazine, or you're going the extra mile to check out the truck. And because like I said, they've been socially and culturally conditioned to kind of turn into turds. And the thing is, like, we do this. We as a fire service, we create these people in a lot of ways with our cultures, lack thereof, good or bad. Eventually, if we don't put time into developing a good culture, a healthy culture, a culture that is about the job and about taking care of each other, about the brotherhood, then the negative stuff by default, well, it's a vacuum. It's going to get replaced with something, right? And if we don't put the emphasis in the right places, the emphasis is going to find itself.
So let's go in a direction similar to this. Let's stay in this realm for a second, okay? And let's accept the fact that culture is what it is. It may not always be good. It may not always be bad, but it evolves. It erodes. It improves. And yet at the same time, I think what a lot of company officers forget is that they have the power to change the culture in their immediate environment. And it all comes down to accepting the fact that there are some things you have no control over. And that's what happens at your administrative level. All right. You're not there every day of the week for 8 to 10 hours, working at a desk and make financial decisions and personnel decisions. You're managing a crew of people, individuals that are very susceptible to outside opinions and very susceptible to the negativity that exists out there. And unfortunately, it does exist in this profession of ours, because you're right. There are plenty of people that duck, dodge, dip, dive, and dodge stuff, or avoid it to a point where they become very negative about it, whether it's training or running calls. And don't get me wrong, I get frustrated in the middle of the night when I have to wake up for the 4th time to a nursing home, but that's not the same as being able to shut that down and then focus on what I need to do. So I think what we often forget is that while there may be good and bad with culture, depending on where you're at, it doesn't matter. Most departments have good and bad components, and some areas haven't evolved as well as others. The person who runs that truck, that company, that station every 3rd day, well, guess what? They can influence a unique culture to that station, not misaligning with the positive side of how culture should be for a department, not violating SOPs, SOGs is what I'm not trying to say that, but it's hard to do. But you as the company officer can control the culture of your environment if you're willing to do so, and shield those people as best you can from that negativity. I think it was said best in Private Saving Private Ryan: gripes go up, they don't go down. So you shouldn't let your gripes impact the people around you, because that does show not it's not a show of weakness in the positive. It's a show of weakness in the negative, because if they're seeing you break down over things that categorically don't matter in the firehouse, beyond your control as at your level of leadership, then you're influencing others to think that way. You're influencing others to go down that road. And then any little thing that goes wrong, they're going to capitalize on an opportunity to say, fuck this, fuck that. How dare they do this to me? And let's be realistic. What is most what are most of the complaints you're going to find in the average firehouse when it comes to, people in general? What are most of the complaints you're going to find? I'm not making enough money. I'm not getting enough time off. I'm getting mandatory. I got to go do this for the third time this week, training again. Well, I don't know. There's a million different, things I could bring up here. But in the end, who controls that environment is the person who is in the right seat of that truck. And it's not a new concept, not a foreign concept. It's difficult to do. I'm not saying it's easy. The advice I give doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone, but you have to understand, again, that goes back into the concept of getting your crew on board with being better and explaining to them the expectations you have. And at the end of the day, the expectations for any of my probies are simple. Show up to work with a good attitude. And even if you screw up, we'll work through it and get you past it. You can't do really anything in the first 20 shifts with me that's going to get you fired unless you just blatantly disregard an order or create a problem that is beyond even my scope of being able to handle. And the one thing we need to also remember, when you become an officer, you're a problem solver at that point. Not saying firefighters can't, because we do, but when you're wearing that bugle, now people are looking at you to solve problems. Your leadership team is looking at you to solve problems. They don't want you to just hand every problem off to them. What does that show? What kind of behavior does that demonstrate? What kind of message does that send to a new recruit if you send everything up the chain and never handle a problem and never try to work through a problem as a company officer? What kind of cohesion does that build? And what kind of message do you think they're going to carry out to the field when they are interacting with an officer of a different mentality? And it's like, well, why are you bothering? Because this guy didn't care. Why would you help me if this guy didn't want to help me? Instead of passing the buck, do your job. Fucking show up and do your best. Don't try to be perfect. Just show up and give a damn.
No, I love that. And that's really the thing is it's that whole like 10 pounds of pressure 100% of the time, right? Like if you want anything to change, like we can all sit around the kitchen table. We can bitch about the new guys. We can bitch about the old guys. We can bitch about anything. I mean, firemen are great at doing that. Like,
we're going to talk shit.
Yeah.
We all talk shit, Sean. None of us are immune from talking shit. Let's be honest.
None of us. I mean, we all do. And to say that you don't, if you're like, oh, I don't do that, I don't engage that, like everybody does to some degree.
Oh, yes.
However, with that being said, when you focus more on negatives than you do positives, you allow that to fester, it only creates more issues. If we were all just to understand that it's not about me or you or anybody else in that firehouse, right? It's about what we said we would do when we showed up to work, regardless of the situation, right? So when people come into your firehouse, they have this big vision of what you do, and they just think you're the greatest, right? Like you can do no wrong. Like, oh, the firemen are so great; they're gonna fix everything, thank you so much. And we openly take that. And we're like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then we go back and we do the opposite. We do the opposite to each other. We treat each other like crap. We talk shit about our administrators. We do all this other stuff. But who's taking action, right? So you alluded to it earlier, Jason, when you said just be in charge of your shift. The way I see it is I don't give a shit what anybody else in my city is doing while they're on duty. I don't care. All I care about is the crew I'm with that day, that I can look to my left, I can look to my right and know like it's going to be a good day.
Right.
Whatever happens today is going to get handled. And in the event that, something changes, maybe we get like a cadet or something like that, then my view is, again, I'm not perfect. Hell, I mess up all the time, but I'm going to take every opportunity I can for that person to tell them what I've learned, not just about our organization, but about the job, so that they have those nuggets. I'm going to take every opportunity I can to listen from my driver, listen to my officer, listen to all that. And like I said, I may not agree and whatever. They might be the most negative people in the world. But if there's one thing that we learn, you're either going to leave better or you're going to leave that shift realizing there's some shit that you definitely don't want to do when you have the chance to be at the helm, right? Okay. So I say all of that to say this. If we would spend a lot less time focusing on everybody else and reading and saying, like, what is our mission, right? Every fire department has a mission statement. We all knew why we got in the fire service. We all know the expectations of our citizens. If we spend more of our time in our shift focusing on getting better at all of that stuff, we could solve 90% of these issues.
Absolutely.
The fact is, we're too lazy and we rather sit around, drink coffee, and talk shit and laugh and joke and do all that other stuff. And that's not all bad stuff. Don't get me wrong. But you have 24 hours in the day to do whatever else you want. Majority of your shift, focus on being there for one another, asking them about family, how things are going, that stuff. Get to know each other. Focus on like, hey, what can we do better? Last day we had training and all these issues happened. I know training's not on the schedule today, but let's table talk something or go out and like drop line in the street or do something, right? Because when the tone drops and I'm first to, fuck, man, I'm setting the stage for a lot of things that happen. That company's setting the stage. And then when you come back to the firehouse, it's the same thing, man. If you have one crew, like one shift that's just so like negative, watch the dynamic in that firehouse change. It is unreal, right?
So it blankets it boils negativity.
Yeah, and I don't have the answers. I'm not saying I don't claim to have the solution to everything. What I am saying is, if everybody could just understand that, like, the only thing you're in control of is what happens on your shift in your station in that 24 hours. Focus there, make those micro changes, and then hopefully people will catch on, right? You'll be that crew that people want to go to. When when people get hired and they ask the question like, what are the good crews to go to? What firehouse should I go to? Your name can be mentioned, but you've got to take those actions and you've got to do all that other stuff. And you know what? You're going to get stones thrown at you because people are going to be uncomfortable
all the time,
right?
All the time.
That you're going against the grain.
Yeah.
But who cares? Enjoy that, right? I'd much rather do that and know that I'm impacting people, at a micro level than to join the masses and realize that not only am I destroying the culture within my organization, I'm destroying my values at the same time.
So what's the point of being in a position of leadership if you're not willing to make that time and invest that time? If you're only doing it for a pay raise, if you're only doing it for the satisfaction that you can wear a bugle and start throwing orders out there and, be oblivious to the real world and not learn how to collaborate with others and your leaders above you immediately, how they want you to operate and find a way to build that out. And then of course, impart that. And then I'll take this into a different direction. What's the point of going out and bettering yourself in the world of education and academia if you're not willing to give it back to the agencies that you work for as well? Because I think that's another deterrent. We talked about it just a little bit ago, that hoarding of information, which is not an uncommon thing, sadly, but there are plenty of good people that want to share. And then the other thing to consider here, it can be contagious if you allow it to be, if you represent in your very best way that you can, the fallible human being that we are. If you demonstrate those qualities out there, maybe other leaders might see that and say, you know what, maybe we should change our tune. Maybe we could. It's not improbable. It's not impossible. I was one step away from throwing my career away. And if it wasn't for the people around me that said, hey, you're fucking up, let's get this turned around, or you are gone, then I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So why can't we invest in that aspect and just accept the fact that no department's perfect. No pay is going to be perfect. The hours aren't going to be perfect. There are side effects and implications to taking this job, including missing holidays, getting mandatory, losing out on opportunity to hang out with your friends. But in the end, you're a public servant. And guess what? Guess what? You're there to do a job for 24 hours. Do the best fucking job you can.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really what it is, right? Like, we live in a time, like, we're fortunate that things aren't being recorded inside of our firehouse, because guess what? When those bay doors open and we step out in the public, everything gets recorded.
Yes, it does.
All right. So you really got to look at it like that. Like, what kind of image do you want to present? Right. I always say, like, if you're the same person outside of the firehouse, right? We put on our uniform, we go to a grocery store, and we're that person because we have an image to uphold, right, to the public. You should be that same person inside your firehouse, period. And if you can't, then maybe a leadership position isn't for you. Maybe public service isn't for you. And one of the things that I feel very strongly about is we have a problem in our fire industry where people lose sight of their purpose. They lose the passion for the job. And instead of being real and honest with themselves and saying, this is not what I want for myself anymore, they hang around and they become 20-year problems, right?
Right.
For what reason? Oh, the pension and all that other stuff. Guess what? There's a lot of great pension plans out there. There's a lot of great 401 plans out there.
Yeah.
If this is really not for you, please just leave. It's really that simple, because you know what? You might get a fire chief that's going to come in and make changes, but then there's going to be a whole group of other people that hate all those changes that were made, and that
Right.
problem's still there. So if you can't learn how to navigate this and make the best out of your career, and especially in a leadership role where you're tasked with taking people further than what you can be, if you're not prepared for that and you can't do that, man, you're doing nothing but hurting the fire service as a whole. That's all you're doing.
No,
Yeah.
that's well said. Go ahead, Dick.
No, dude, that's spot on. I mean, at the end of the day, kind of want to clarify something too, talking about culture, and I want to hit this just briefly. And I guess what I was getting at with that as an officer or a senior guy on the job is you have to know the culture of your organization. Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything and the way things are. Like, you have to be above that, right? If you want to have a culture of training, right, then you have to be about it. And you're going to take shots from guys that maybe, whatever that baseline is in your organization. If you want to move that needle a little bit, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of consistency. And as a mentor, you have to be willing, like you said, Jason, to kind of take those stones, kind of take that beating sometimes, because maybe that's not the culture in your organization. You're trying to change that culture, right? You're trying to invest in your mentees and help them be better than you were, and help to really, if you want to change a culture for the better, what better way to do it than to invest in the people coming in the door? Because those people eventually are going to be the majority, right? Those people are eventually, if you can reach a couple of those people and they can reach a couple of people and reach a couple of people, that's how change happens slowly, really and truly, is to invest in the people. That's the future of your organization. So, you have to understand that baseline and have a healthy appreciation for it, because anytime you step outside of that norm, as a mentor, as an officer, as a person that is trying to influence new guys or gals coming in the door, you are kind of, kicking the hornet's nest to some degree, because that's not the norm. That's not the expectation, and if you're all of a sudden the officer that says, hey, you know what? Don't worry about the coffee. Let's go out here and go over the rig because this is your first day and I want you to know about that more than I do. I'll teach you the coffee stuff later. Well, let's talk about the rig and putting your gear on and getting, the hose off the truck. I mean, that takes a little bit of courage, because as a mentor, you're putting yourself out there, right? You're doing something that maybe hasn't been the case in the past, or maybe you're trying to change the attitude. Maybe there's been a bad attitude in your firehouse for a number of years over, administration or over the way things are, and you're trying to get. Not saying you don't see that stuff and you're not real, but you have to have a healthy respect for where you're at, like the reality of your culture and your department's expectations. But if you want to be better than that, if you want to go the extra mile to help other people be better than that, then it's going to have to be, you're going to have to understand that you're going to have to kind of work around your culture, so to speak, the expectations of the department. And I guess I say it from this perspective. If, let's say, your department doesn't have an expectation that people work out every shift. I'll just use this as a case in point. But you as an officer want to invest in the health of your people and make them better firefighters, right? You set that example. You set that you're kind of operating outside of the department expectation and trying to get people to follow you, to have higher expectations, to have higher, the bar is a little higher for them. And in order to do that, you have to have buy-in. You have to have, if they don't buy in, at the end of the day, whatever the department expectation is at the top, you have no control over that. Like, they could push the issue, right, and eventually say, hey, no, this isn't in our SOPs. We don't have to do this, right? But if you want them to come along with you, you have to set the example, and it's that gentle 10% of pressure 100% of the time, right? And trying to explain the why. Like, I want you to be healthy. I want you to live, and have a long, healthy career and be able to retire and enjoy the benefits of the job, right? I want you to be able to be effective on the fire ground, right? Explaining the why, getting that buy-in. And then from the mentee side of things, right? If we're looking at things from the guy coming in the door or the gal coming in the door, I think it goes a long way if you understand, learn the department's history, department's culture, the department's baseline, before you come in and just start spewing like, it's a mutual respect thing, right? I want to invest in you as an officer, but at the same time, I need you to learn the why we do things, the why behind why we do things the way we do, the reasons for the way things are. I think that goes a long way. It's a mutual respect. Like, I'm going to invest in you. I want to hear your voice. I want to hear your concerns, your questions, but I also want you to ask questions and learn about us and about how we're doing things and why we're doing things. It doesn't mean you agree with them, but at least you understand the context. And I think that goes a long way for you got new people coming to the door. It's easy. And I'll bring this up because I think this is a conversation I've had recently. The fire service has changed in the last 10 years. Lateral entry has become a normal thing in the fire service. And so you have people coming in the door with 5, 6, 7 years on the job or more. And we had this conversation before the show started, right? About people coming in with experience and expectations or maybe some background. I think it's important for us as organizations to value that, because maybe these people have some stuff that they can bring to the table. It's really, really good. But conversely, the new recruit coming in, it's a lot different to get a guy that's fresh out of academy versus someone with 8 years on the job from a Northern career organization. And that mentorship and that expectation maybe looks a little bit different because you anticipate, if you worked 8 years in a job somewhere, there's some anticipation that maybe you kind of know what's up. You should at least have a working expectation and of that, hey, they should be able to pull a hose line, know the general flow of how the fire ground looks or a vehicle accident, things like that. That person coming to the door, it takes a lot of humility too from the recruit coming to the door. If you do have background in something, to learn the why in that organization, respect the organization, but at the same time, you can ask questions in a way tactfully, right, to interject maybe some background. And I guess what I'm getting at is the two-way street that Sean talked about earlier. When we're talking about the mindset and how we approach teaching and learning, it's a two-way street. The mentor needs to understand the system they're operating in. They need to understand the person that they're speaking to. Is it a new recruit that's 21 years old, fresh out of academy, or is it a 32-year-old guy that just came 8 years from another department? What is their background? What are their aspirations? Things like that. But at the same token, the people coming to the door, we need to let them know that our expectation is like, hey, respect the process, respect the organization, right? Because if you come in and just say this organization is whack, like screw this place, like you're doing it all wrong, and I think this is dumb, that's also not going to go well, right? Those are two different extremes. Obviously, coming in and keep your mouth shut, don't say anything, versus the guy that comes in and knows it all. Those are both bad situations to be in. And so I think like that mentor-mentee relationship does change based on culture. It changes based on the people that are involved. And I think it also changes, based on how we communicate, those things to each other. And like, hey, I'm your officer, but I know that, hey, you spent 10 years in construction. I'm going to pick your brains from time to time on building construction. Or, hey, you were an electrician for, a number of years. Hey, we got this call and we're trying to smells and bells and we're trying to trace, is this a hotline or not? Again, it comes down to, tap your people for their experience and their resources and their perspectives. But you got to do it respectfully, right? They got to respect the process, the department, the organization. And I think you have to have a mutual understanding of, what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that's what gets lost in translation sometimes, is we kind of go down this road of like one size fits all for mentorship and coaching. And it really, like you said, it is very situational. Sean, you talked about, before the podcast, we're talking about like tactics and stuff and situational tactics. It's the same thing in the firehouse with the soft skills. My approach to someone who's 19, 20 years old that just finished fire academy is a lot different than a 35-year-old man that has worked in other places, that's got a family and kids and different life experiences. You can't approach them the same. They're not the same people. And it's not the same situation. And I think too, if you're a new officer, that's different than a guy that's been an officer for 15 years. Like there's just different, places in the path, so to speak. And if you approach people the right way and there's a mutual understanding of where we stand collectively, like that's what I'm getting at, is we have to find a way to bridge that gap where those people are. We have to go to where they're at to mentor them. And if we try to approach, like I said, the 35-year-old man with 2 kids, wife and a whole career behind him, the same way as you approach a 20-year-old kid that's still trying to figure out how to tie his shoes, like that is just a different mindset. And that's, I'm speaking because I've been on both sides. I've been the new kid that don't know his ass from a hole in the ground. And I've been the guy that, now as a fireman in Wisconsin, I can tell you that mutual respect goes a long way, but not saying there's any special treatment, but it's just a different approach. If someone comes to me and talks to me like I'm an 18-year-old kid fresh out of fire school, I'm probably going to tune them out. I may respectfully just keep my mouth shut and okay. But I'm going to walk away and say that guy's a fucking idiot.
So go ahead, because I just want to hit on that. I just want to interrupt for 2 seconds. So I can totally identify with the area of concern for lateral transfer. I was one, and as I stated, my career early on took a much different path than I had hoped, because I didn't stop doing what I was doing, repeating bad behavior and practices. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's something to be said for experience. There's nothing wrong with having it. I mean, I became a much better paramedic because that was the bulk of what I did in Putnam. Later becoming a firefighter, and then ending my career there as a firefighter medic. I learned a little bit on the fire side, even though I was volunteering in other places and having fun. But there's also something to be said for that the people that, and this saying just bugs the hell out of me, and it's something corrected almost immediately, is, well, the way we did it then, or the way we did it here, or this isn't how we did it. That line of statements, those particular statements are really chaps my ass, because I have to remind them, you're a firefighter for this department now.
Yes.
You're no longer a firefighter there. And
correct.
While operationally, we have equipment that's similar, and maybe even areas that are similar, our operational approach may be a little different in other areas that you need to learn. And if you're not willing to learn those areas, and you only want to tell me how good you were elsewhere, you're probably not as good as you think you are, because I can tell you, I could barely connect hose from a hydrant to a truck, back in the early days. I was that dumb, thinking, well, I'll live on my laurels and my accomplishments from the other place and think it'll work. And it doesn't fucking work, because it'll catch up with you. So in the end, if you're someone considering a lateral move, and it doesn't matter if you have 2 years on, 5 or 10 years on, I've seen people as old as 51, come into the fire service from a different job. It is what it is. You have to accept the fact that your knowledge is valuable, but you can't make it the only knowledge that's valuable.
Yes.
Because if you do that, you're shorting opportunity for you to grow, and you're only going to create a bad environment for you, culturally speaking, individually speaking.
Those words should never leave your mouth unless someone specifically asks you, how did you do things where you came from?
Right.
Period.
Yes.
And that's a fair question, Sean.
Or, right, the opposite, when you're in that training moment and saying, hey, I have a question because all I know, I only know it how it was where I came from.
Right.
So I'm asking so I can do it how you want me to do it here. I don't give a fuck when people say, well, where I came from, we did this way. Well, then if it was so fucking great where you came from, why did you leave?
Oh, there's always a reason. There's always a reason,
right?
So, the chief was a shitbag, or we weren't getting paid enough, or I had to ride rescue all the time, and that's just another thing that chaps my ass. But that'll be later,
But that doesn't. So it doesn't mean when someone says like, well, this is how we did it the other way, or where I came from. I don't want to say like, well, they were wrong,
right? Because they're not necessarily wrong.
It's not necessarily wrong, but you're in a different place. Like, I'll take my position. Perfect example. All right, I come from Florida. I moved to Michigan. You think I know how to fight fires in a city with frat houses and all that other stuff? I have not a fucking clue.
You're learning, though.
The building construction's all different. Everything's different. So although my experiences from Florida and stuff like that have taken me a little bit further and I have some knowledge, I have a shit ton to learn. So coming into a new organization, I'm like, well, the way we did it here is totally irrelevant. Doesn't mean a thing, because our tactics and strategies are completely different.
Yeah, that's it, man. You gotta come in with some humility, and I think that's the point. Is like, have some tact. And again, it goes back to mutual respect, right? And if you have mentors and senior guys and officers that come in, if you show respect as a new guy coming in the door, right, and understand that you don't know everything, and that's what I'm getting at is on one hand, we're saying, that we shouldn't, as officers, as senior guys, we shouldn't discount our people just because they're new, right? We shouldn't discount their experiences and their perspectives, or maybe they see something we don't see. And there's a lot of that that's getting put out in the fire service, and it's good because it has broke down some of those walls. But on the same token, it's a two-way street. Again, going back to the person coming in the door also has to be teachable. They have to be willing to be mentored. Kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like, it is one of those things, they have to be willing to receive that mentorship and that instruction and that coaching. And that's the thing. I mean, like, we should be able to have honest and open communication as senior guys to junior guys, as officers to their people, right? But there has to be, as long as there's respect there and a willingness to learn where each one is coming from, I think that's where we win and succeed as a service. When we get to this mindset, I think both attitudes are wrong. I think it's the wrong mindset to have, shut up, sit in the corner and color, don't talk unless you're, spoken to. I think that's the wrong approach. But I also think it's the wrong approach to come in entitled, thinking just because you did something XYZ here, or you went to this school or that school, or you have this cert or that cert, that automatically entitles you to throwing your weight around and we need to change this, we need to change that, this is dumb, we should do it this way. Both of those approaches are wrong. The answer is if we're going to grow and be better, is somewhere in the middle. And the thing is, if you're humble and you work hard and you do have some wits about you and you kind of know what's going on, that's going to shine through in your actions. Let your actions speak for you as a new guy, and as an officer or a mentor, a person coming, that's been there for a while. Like, I think, it's behooves us to learn where these people are coming from, because you may, like I said, you may learn something too. We can learn from each other. And I think that's the big point is I'm trying to drive here is, I've seen guys that are 5-6 years on the job, that are ate up, that are into it, that have a lot to offer, that, guys that have been on the job 20 years, that have done their first year 20 times over, that are just there for a paycheck, like we talked about, that are just, Sean, you talked about it, the people that just kind of stick around for the pension and they haven't applied themselves, and maybe they are way behind the curve with what's going on in the fire service. But the point is, like, in either of those situations, if we want respect, we have to give respect, right? If we want credibility, we have to earn it. We have to go out and let our actions speak. And if we want to teach people, we have to, be willing to set the example, even if that means putting ourselves out there in our culture. And like I said, I mean, if you're in a department that doesn't emphasize training, like, it's going to be an uphill battle initially, probably, to get people to bite off on doing more training. But stay the course, right? Just keep a positive attitude. Don't let the shit weigh you down. And explain the why it's important. Eventually, you get new people coming to the door. The people that have been there 10, 15 years, you may never sway them, right? Those people may be set in a rut, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with the fact that maybe the chief is just, overstayed his welcome and he's not going to budge on certain issues. But again, what can you control? As a company officer, you control your crew, right? You can control the culture and the mindset and the expectations on your crew to a certain point, right? And as a firefighter, what can you control? Your attitude towards training, your attitude towards the job, running calls, things like that. Control what you can control, and don't lose sight of the fact, the big picture of, like, it does matter. People are watching, and just because you're just a lieutenant or just a firefighter or just a driver, you're not a chief, you're making those decisions, fine. That's fine. Control what you can control, fix what you can fix. There's not a perfect department out there. You said that earlier, Jason. That's what I'm getting at is we have to understand the context that we operate in, understand your culture. If you want to change it, it's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It's going to take humility. It's probably going to cause you some gray hairs, or losing hair altogether.
So I love that. And there's a couple things I want to bring up. And one of the first things I want to bring up, and the second is going to be a little bit of a longer conversation. Not every department is for everybody. All right. I can tell you that I've seen members of my agency struggle horribly, struggle miserably, leave with a chip on their shoulder. Sometimes not on their own volition, because maybe they just weren't adapting to the way that we operate, which is difficult and complex, even though it's second nature to a lot of us that are senior. It's hard to put those departmental expectations on people who may be brand new to the service and weren't expecting to have to be the jack of all trades on a minimum crew size of 2 to 3, depending on if we're lucky enough to get that. But there's also, the perspective that when they leave and maybe they go to a different department, they find their center and their happiness because maybe that was the one size they needed that fit, so it doesn't mean you're a bad firefighter necessarily. It would be remiss of me to say that we don't put high expectations on everybody that walks through the door. But there are some that leave because it's just overwhelming and they're not mentally ready for that challenge. It's not their fault necessarily. It's just, we do expect a lot to get done with a crew of 2 and on any given scene. And that can tax most people. But they thrive in the new environment where maybe the crew size is a standard of 3. Maybe the tactics are a little bit different. Maybe the resources around them are a little beefed up. And they're better in that environment because they're surrounded by masses rather than a minority, and they're able to adapt to that environment better. And they're one task oriented in some cases versus having to do 10 different tasks in a matter of 2 minutes before you break a door down and go inside of a burning building even. So I think that when you talk about one's performance and adhering or growing into the culture, it's fun to say what we said, but I think we also have to accept the fact that maybe not everybody's cut out for the agency that they signed up for and were hired with, and sometimes you have to have that conversation too to address it, and maybe they'll thrive elsewhere. And I've seen it happen a lot. It's important that you identify it early though, because if you don't, they're going to get locked in and they're not going to want to leave, even though they want to, unless it's something too good to pass up. They're going to stay, and they might not ever perform to the level you want them to perform at, no matter what, because they feel stuck or trapped and they're just unhappy. And I hate to see that, but I've seen plenty of people come and go. I've seen plenty of people on their 4th and 5th job. I've seen plenty of people who are brand new, 19, right out of high school, EMT school and fire school, that either thrive or don't thrive. It's really dependent on, and you said it, expectations of what you're walking into. And if we don't set those right off the bat, which we're supposed to, then they have less of a chance of thriving, or at least finding out if they're a best fit for the agency that they got hired by. That's my concern. Now, if you want to continue on that, I'm down with that. But there's one other concern I want to bring up, if you give me that second. I'm very concerned about seeing the overall downward spiral of the number of applications coming into departments nowadays. It's scary. I mean, I can remember how competitive it used to be, how you'd have 10 spots and 500 people apply for those 10 spots. Or if you're a small department and you have 1 spot and you get 300 or 400 people to apply for that 1 spot. And now, most recently, I think we had 14 or 15 apply for 20 spots. And it's not just here in my agency, it's spreading. It's all over. It's scary to see that. And, it's kind of like 2008, where people were jumping ship in the economic downturn and they were going back into private enterprise. Some went to construction, some went into real estate, some went into whatever they were planning on doing. Hope they're happy now. Some came back after the fact, but we lost a huge chunk of our experience with that happening. And it's taken a long time to catch back up. And now we're in another downward spiral. And it seems like we're getting far less people applying. And I don't know if it's just a Florida thing. I don't know. But it scares me because sometimes you don't get the best candidate, period, but you're forced to hire them because you have to meet an expectation for providing crew for the trucks that operate daily. And it doesn't always work well in the long term sometimes.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I'm glad that you brought that up because we do experience that here in Michigan. I'm sure Nick has experienced that in Wisconsin as well. I mean, it seems to be just the standard norm now. It's the thing for me. I don't know what the reason is, and I hate to speculate that I do, but I'd like to think that there's a multitude of reasons. But we're having this conversation here. We're not the only ones having similar conversations, right?
Oh,
Imagine
absolutely.
what it looks like for people that leave the fire service, that someone says, "Oh, you were a firefighter? That's so cool. That's awesome." That person wants to know what it was like to be a firefighter.
Mhm.
And because you hated it, or you left, or whatever, or you're just burnt out, whatever your reason is, you tell them don't do it. The money's not enough. The pension sucks. You'll never sleep. And you just give them all these negative reasons. You know what that person says? Why the fuck would I want to do that?
Yeah.
So what does that individual do? Oh, I talked to so-and-so. I met a firefighter the other day. They told me not to do it because of X, Y, and Z. Now you're just repeating things. And that's a vicious cycle because you could have just from your one opinion impacted 15, 20 other people.
Right.
Easily. Right. So that's one issue. The other thing is, with the lack of applications, I honestly truly think that when you look at the way things are out in, civilian life,
right,
there are so many options to make a lot more money or roughly the same amount of money without the amount of education we have to go through, without the stress and the responsibility. I really think responsibility is a big factor here. When you tell people, hey man, your actions, whether it be fire or EMS, will save or kill people, and you are directly held accountable for that. That's a huge weight. It's a huge burden, right? So, that's scary to some people. Those are the two things that I think play a role in it. But let's look at the other side of things. Our administration. People will get so pissed off. I can't believe the fire chief hired this dud. What the hell was he thinking or she was thinking? Like, whatever. Listen, you think the people that are counting money care about that? They don't. All they're going to tell the fire chief is, why are you spending so much money on overtime?
Right.
Why? And then we get articles out there published. So-and-so firefighter from this made $250,000 a year. And people are missing the context. Plus, the flip side of that is you're overworking the people you have there now.
Oh,
so what happens when they get burnout? You see what I'm saying? So we can blame and point fingers all we want, but like when we look at our administration, we have to just be realist for a minute and understand that they're doing the best they can.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes their hands are tied and there's nothing they can do because, like you said, the only thing the powers to be want to see is asses in the seat so you can start saving money because they have plans, right? And they're tired of seeing all this overtime spent when you could have hired somebody, but you chose not to because they were not a good fit for your organization.
And that can consume an administrator's day, week, month, in some cases career, depending on the context of who's asking why. And again, I'm not an administrator. I'm a lieutenant. I don't know all the ins and the outs that happen up at the administrative side of things. I learned from some of my peers up there, and I'm not in that position yet. And it's so easy to judge. But then there's also, on a flip side, where you're smart enough to read between the bullshit, and you have an obligation to maybe call it out if necessary to try to address a bigger problem before it spirals out of control. But in reality, it shouldn't be your focus. And you have to understand that they're disconnected from the field, but it's not by it's not necessarily a choice they make. It's kind of by proxy, by position, where they have to separate themselves, because if they overinvest in one side, they can't commit to making things happen on the other side. And they have a busy enough job to do, a hell of a job to do, trying to balance everything, keep things on track, trucks running. And let me tell you something, at the end of the day, the quality of the candidate may not be always great, but at least we should try to work with them and try to improve their attitudes and their operational capabilities. But it still goes back to that concept of having that tough conversation when the going gets tough and they're not meeting the mark. There's something to be said for someone who's not afraid to step up and say, there's a problem. Because if we don't address it, then we're not going to solve it. If we don't send it up the chain and say, we've got problems, can you work with us, help us? What are your restrictions? What are your confines to solving the problem? What are your specific parameters per se? We can't fix admin's problems, but we can certainly work to find a solution, get involved, create opportunities for members to get out there and engage with the community. Like right now, we have a community engagement team that goes out and recruits. We have a recruitment team. And that's a great concept. We need to be out there in the face of the public. We need to put a face to what we do in the public eye. And I think that says a lot for people who want to share their happiness or their love, even if they're not happy with every aspect of the agency they work for. It's still something to be said for someone who wants to recruit an individual or a group of individuals out of a fire school or wherever they're at that point, EMT school, even in that circumstance. But again, we can sit here and do the admin debate, and it's so easy to fall into that process where we just want to chastise our leaders for everything wrong. And there are bad leaders. Don't mistake what I'm saying is full support for everything. There are bad leaders out there, and there's plenty of them. But at the end of the day, it does circle back to the concept of what do we want to make this department look like? And that is the reality. It's the toughest thing that any one person can do. It doesn't matter if you're a company officer or a line firefighter. No one has all the answers, and not just one person can solve a problem. The whole concept to our job is being part of a team, and you evolve that team and you make it a team that is impactful to the job that we do. That's the simple part, in a sense. The harder part is spreading that wealth.
Yeah, no, it's, it's funny. We always bring up pay and benefits and, all that kind of stuff, guys getting, is that a part of it? Absolutely. People don't want to make the same money that they make at McDonald's, working crazy long hours and missing holidays and birthdays. And, that is part of it. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, as a whole, most of the fire service is, for all that we require nowadays, especially, I mean, look at it. We've become a lot more professional in that we require all these certifications and degrees and all this stuff. And we've tried to go down that road, but we haven't really kept pace with pay and benefits. And that is part of it, certainly. But I think a bigger part, Sean kind of hit on it earlier, is our negative disposition towards the job. And we've been harped on for the last 10 years is, you're going to get cancer, you're going to have PTSD, you're going to get divorced. And we just talk about all the negatives all the time. The admin sucks, the city sucks, blah, blah, blah. And we focus on all this negative stuff all the time. And it's like, it's almost like self-fulfilling prophecy, man. It's like, you're going to get PTSD, just accept it. So instead of teaching people to be resilient and how to have the tools not to go down that road, we just tell them from day one, they're convinced that they're going to have PTSD, they're going to get cancer, and they're going to get divorced and all this other stuff. And they go into their careers, they start with this negative mindset that it's just inevitable, it's going to happen. And I think that's a big problem. That's a huge problem when you're trying to recruit and retain people. And that's the other thing too, is like, you want morale to be high, right? You want people to be, to be selfless and to give towards others. But all we've done is made them run around scared, thinking that there's going to be something wrong with them. They're going to have, they're going to die early and all this other stuff. And we know the stats, we know the information that's out there. But I think, like, when all you do is focus on negative stuff, the lack of pay, the lack of benefits, all this kind of stuff, and people hear that, like Sean was saying, like, that's a turnoff to people that might want to get into this career field. And then for the people that are in the career field, they ain't going to they're not going to do anything above and beyond, like, take any more risks they have to, man. Because, like, hey, we've turned, as a fire service, this mindset of almost, as a society too, it's not just the fire service, it's society, of a very me first mindset. And so if I'm a young person looking to get in the fire service and I can make twice as much money with half the risk, that's a big thing, right? And so what are we selling? And so, and I guess what I'm getting at is this, what brings people in to something like this? If it's not the pay, which has never been the pay in the fire service. Look, historically, we've had crappy pay and long hours. Like, we have historically. Not saying we don't work on those things. And it's not the negative stuff. Like I said, I think we have to manage how we approach that, teach people to be resilient, teach people to take an ounce of, prevention. Right. But at the same time, I think where we're maybe going wrong in some ways is our mindset and our approach to the fire service. And I say that to say this: what do high quality candidates want? What do people that are hard charges that are into being a firefighter, that really want to do this, that want to do it for the right reasons, what do they want? Well, I mean, I think you got to look at those things and say, hey, it's not just good enough to, I think Mark Malone said it best: retention is the best recruitment tool, and in the sense of, if you have, and I think what he was alluding to is, if you have good culture and you have a good, the intangible, so to speak, that people want, that are looking for, right? That culture of training, that culture of excellence, that culture where we take care of each other, we're a family. People want to feel like they're part of something bigger. And that does appeal to the human spirit, right? That's something the fire service has historically done really well up to the last, you look at the last 15 years or so. It seems like there's been a shift in mindset in how we approach the job. It's a job. It's a fire station, not a firehouse. We've taken a lot of the family aspects out. It's become a very sterile work environment where a lot of the joking that used to go on doesn't happen anymore. People don't go out and do stuff as much together as they used to, aside from the firehouse. there's a lot of sterilization that's taking place in the fire service. We've created a us first mindset. We've created this, safety first, your safety is number one mindset. And you're seeing the counterculture to that now in the fire service, in the conference circle, people pushing back against that. But my point is this: what do people that really, what makes them want to appeal and apply and go the extra mile to be a firefighter? It's not the pay, it's not the benefits, it's not any of that stuff, right? It's the stuff that really applies and appeals to people that are into the job are the intangibles. It's the culture, it's the mindset, it's the way we approach the job. And I can tell you right now that if you look at the Colony, Texas is a perfect example, right? They just had a big hiring process. They did interviews for 3 straight days. Chief Thompson, posted something. One of his guys had posted about being on the interview panels. And I think it really resonated with me because it's so true with so many of the guys I know in the fire service, right? He says, here's what the interviewees mentioned: the people that are coming from other departments, lateral entry, coming over to the Colony, they're loading these slots up and hiring, they're hiring X amount of people. And they got, we talk about people lining up like they used to. It's not happening. Why? But here in Texas, they've got all these people lined up for these jobs. Why? What's the difference? And this is what the high quality people, he put it out in a post. Here's their priorities, right? Interviews mentioned these things most often in order: training. Firefighters want to train. Culture, letting firemen be firemen, right? Predetermined riding assignments, 4896 schedule, paramedic only program. Those are the top 5 things that people coming in to that department mentioned. And I thought it really resonated because you look at the fire service, right? Look at how we started, even when I came on the job, it was a lot more family oriented. It was a lot more guys did stuff on their off days together. We broke bread together. We cut up. We teased each other relentlessly. Lots of pranks. Lots of, it was a firehouse. We ate together. Nobody went in their room and played on their phone all day. Like, it was not a place of business in the sense of, we didn't have this super sterile environment. We all slept in one bunk room. We cut up all the time. We ate, we cooked, we cleaned, we trained, we did stuff together. We laughed, we cried. Those are the things like that make a firehouse. And I feel like we've tried too hard in the fire service to sterilize this job, to make it a fire station and you're a professional. And don't get me wrong, I am all for being a professional. But what is a professional? What makes the fire service special? And what draws people in? If it's not the pay, which it never has been, the pay and the benefits and all that stuff, it's the culture, it's the mindset. And when you look at high performers, you look at people that are into the job, what do they want? They want to go to work. They want to have a little pride in their ride. They want to see their, company patches and logos and the esprit de corps stuff. It's the, getting to wear their leather helmet with maybe their cool, sticker on they got from their buddy over in this department, or, getting to go in and, pull hose and throw ladders and search buildings and do fireman stuff and be into the job, right? They want to train. They want to get out there and not just pencil whip or sit for 3 hours and do target solutions. They want to get out there and do the job, whether it's hanging on the side of a building doing rope rescue, whether it's, cutting cars, whether it's all the stuff the stuff that we want to do, right? The stuff that we want to, I'm not saying that the other stuff's not important, but where is our emphasis as a service? And I look at that, and I'm saying this blanketly across the board as a fire service. It's not just in Florida, it's not just in Michigan, it's in Wisconsin, it's across the country. We're having issues, and I think we have to go back to our roots of why we appealed to so many people for so many generations, right? It's got to get back to, in my opinion, who we are, our identity. And I feel like in a lot of ways we've lost our way. I feel like in a lot of ways we have, as collectively, not saying there's not pockets of people who care and who invest in that, but administrators have got to start letting their officers be officers again. Let their firehouses be firehouses. It's not just some sterile fire station environment where everybody's got to be cookie cutter, crisp pressed uniforms, like everything's got to be perfect. Like, and that's, I guess what I'm getting at is, what is more important to the people we're trying to attract, right? What do they really want? I can tell you right now, schedules are a big thing, right? Pay and benefits. Yeah, that's great. But I can tell you right now, I know so many guys that have taken less money to go someplace where they're happy, to go someplace where they feel valued, to go someplace where they feel like they can be a fireman. Why is that? Because people will work for less money if they're in a culture that values the things they value. And I think that's where we're missing the mark as a service. We become too white collar to, in my opinion, this is just Nick Pepper speaking, but from what I've seen, when you talk to people that are willing to go places for less money, it's because they feel valued, because their values aligned. They're going someplace where they can fight fire or be a fireman or be, you know, what they signed up to do. And on the medic thing, right? Here's the deal. It's a huge service. Transport, we do it. I think it's a huge service to our community. I think it's, you know, I know there's a lot of guys that say it should be completely separate. That's fine. I don't necessarily feel that way, but I will say this. You need to have a rotation, because if you beat your new guys up here, it's not fair to put somebody on an ambulance for 8 to 10 years and then expect them, when they get off the ambulance finally, when they finally get enough seniority, to have a spark and a love for being a fireman again. Like, when you beat the fire out of them and all they do is get shit pounded, and let's just be honest, they get shit pounded on the box for 10 years, like, they're not going to want to be firemen. Like, they're so over it at this point because they've been getting piss pounded while the engine's sleeping or the truck's sleeping or whatever. Like, it's part of it. It's part of coming in and being new, but have a rotation and stick to it. We are firefighter paramedics. We are fire first. And
he did. It's too late. It's already out there.
I said it. So, you know, but the thing is, like,
Sorry.
don't beat the fire.
We're at training day right now. We're the movie training day at this moment. Okay.
Go ahead, Eric.
So I'm on my rant. I'm on my rant, but
Nick's on his soapbox. It's okay.
I am on a soapbox right now, because here's the deal. Don't tell people you're a firefighter paramedic and then all they are is a paramedic. They never get to do fireman shit. They never get to train. They never, you know, and I'm saying that because as a fire service, we're really good about taking our new people and just saying, get on it becomes the penalty box. It's a penalty to be on there because I'm just going to get piss pounded for 10 years. And the thing is, like, that's not the answer either. I think
we went to fist now. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
We went from shit pounded to piss pounded.
Oh, I thought it was
working
fist.
our way around the body.
We're going around the circle here.
We're making the circle. So
okay.
But I mean, you know, that message though is this, you know, have a rotation. We are firefighters first. We are the fire department first. And I understand people get hired. They're new. They're going to do their time on the ambulance. If you got ambulances, that is the way it goes. However, we have to take time to let them be firefighters. You have to invest in the fire stuff too. Otherwise, they're going to get it beat out of them. They're not going to want to do it. Like I said, they're going to get to a point where they're so burned out because you sold them on the fact that they were hired as a firefighter paramedic, but they haven't been a firefighter in 10 years. You know, and don't, hey, and this is just reading, like I said, the Colony's post about it. You know, that's one of the top 5 things for ALS departments is guys want to feel like they're still firefighters too. They don't mind being paramedics, right? Most guys are like, hey, I get it. It's part of the job. Like, but they are firefighters too. And we have to invest in that. And again, it goes back to what are we doing as a fire service to make it a firehouse, not a fire station? What are we doing to make it, where there's a training culture, where we allow some esprit de corps, where we allow guys some personalization, some love for the job, right? Let them take pride in their ride. Let them, come up with a company patch or company logos. Let them, get off that ambulance, rotate them off, have a rotation and stick to it. Let them get their time on the engine and the ambulance. Let them do, fireman stuff. Take them out of service, for God's sake. You can't do training on the ambulance. Let's be honest. You're not getting much quality training on the ambulance unless you go out of service. Take them out of service for an hour. Let them go drill. That's one thing our department's done in recent years. They take the ambulance out of service, let them do training so they can actually put their gear on and train. And those are things that are important. I don't know, man. Like I said, I think we have done a really bad job as a service of selling all the negative stuff and not investing in enough of the good stuff. We've gotten away from the stuff that made us great. The service mindset, the them before me, we're a team, we're a family. This is a firehouse, not a fire station. It's not okay for everybody on their cell phones all day in their rooms, hiding from the officer all day. That's not okay.
No, you're right. But let's go back a few steps here before we started fisting, pissing, and pushing. So you hit it right off the get-go with the concept of being a high performer, and I mean, whatever that looks like. It's an individualistic trait, in my opinion. Okay. You're talking about, there was a recent article about how you've got a lot of athletes who may have made it semi-pro or pro for a brief period of time, and they're adapting to the world of being a public servant, which, by the way, that's what we are. I want to key in on those two words, public and servant. That's what you sign up for, to be selfless, to give of yourself, to sacrifice for others. That's the concept there. So let's not, forget that, number one. But high performers, I think, conceptually, what they really want is the ability to perform with the best resources, tools, and training and surroundings possible, so they can thrive. And the fire service is good for that, because it doesn't matter if you're a small department, a big department, even under budgeted departments. Okay, you still have good equipment, God willing, right? But performers just want to perform, and it's adaptable to them to be able to change an approach to performing, because it's instilled in them to face adversity, to face challenges, to be a critical thinker. Okay, to do all of that stuff. But the other side of this equation is, we take money out of this. We take the benefits out of it. Those are great. The retirement, the salary that we get paid. It may not be much, and for some it is. And Sean hit on the point. The 250. Well, that guy probably worked so much overtime that he probably saw his family once a month. Let's just put that in perspective, okay? Because that's probably how that happened, and it probably wasn't all voluntary. Some of it was probably mandatory, and some of it was probably voluntary to get away from being mandatory the next shift if possible, so they could get that out of the way.
Non-consensual overtime.
Okay, now see, that's where you're getting really creepy. But I like what you're saying. It's okay. But at the end of the day, if the only thing you're worried about is a paycheck, then c'est la vie. Get out. You're not going to perform. It's not meant to be servitude is not meant to be compensated in a sense where it should outweigh the importance of being the servant. You have to remember why we do this fucking job. We're here to help people, and bad things happen when we do that. Bad things have to happen for us to be those servants, and we have to accept that. And on top of that, we go back into a couple of different avenues here. Let's talk about the lateral stuff real quick. One of the things I tell people, and I've said it to you, Sean, and I think I've said it to you, Nick. I know I've said it to you. Stop chasing the lateral fucking dream. Stop it now. Because number one, you're never going to be content. You're going to carry a chip on your shoulder, and guess what you're going to do? You're going to waste an entire career not accomplishing anything but changing the uniform every 5 to 6 years. Stop. Make the best of what you have. And the only way you're going to get better is if you step out of your fear zone, your comfort zone, whatever you want to call it, your complacent zone, and actually do something to be better. Actually step up and try. Trying makes a difference. Growth makes a difference. I started out in this profession as a dispatcher, making $25,000 a year in '97 with a family of one, almost two at that point. I made $9 an hour to start. No, $7-ish. I'm sorry, $7-ish to start in Putnam. I'm not going to disclose where I'm at now, but I can tell you that it took every bit of 20 years. It took every bit of education I could get my hands on. It took every bit of sacrifice, loss. And yet those who stick through not having a raise for 7 years after walking into a new department, who didn't jump ship, who stayed the course, who didn't think that they could do it better elsewhere, and just wanted to do it where they were at because they love it. Those are the people you want around you. Those are the people that are going to be appreciative, even if they didn't have everything. So if you're coming into the fire service expecting that you're going to be given the red carpet welcome and that you're going to be elevated to a platform that is bigger than you, well, you are in a sense, but that platform is service, and that is you giving of yourself. And there's no greater concept than giving of yourself to make someone else happy, to help them feel better, to save their life. You just have to accept the fact that this job comes with that responsibility. And I love the fact that, the colony pulls all that out. I know we got a couple of friends, the three of us have a couple of friends that work for that department, and that's awesome. And I'm glad that they're representing that way. But if you're going to make any department good, it's going to come from the people that work for that department. And you've got to remind people what it means to be a servant sometimes, and accept the fact that people get sick, people get hurt, and PTSD is a real thing. I'm not even going to sugarcoat that. And thank God Florida's proactive amongst however many states have legislation in place to protect our brothers and sisters when we hit that point. Because I can tell you, just up the road from me, 4 4. And it's hard to, it's hard to talk about it to some degree because these were young men. A couple of them I knew, taught. It's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see that. And if you think that department's not doing their best to try to fix this problem, well, maybe there are some shortcomings, sure. But I think it's up to us to, and it's not just, it's a village. It takes a fucking village to try to change. But if you're beat down, I get it. If you're hard pressed to even step up because you're so exhausted, I get it too. But there has to be an understanding that we don't just serve the citizens of our community. That's the priority, right? Always is. We have to serve each other as brothers and sisters and as family if we're going to take this every third day concept, home and seriously, because a third of our life may be spent with these people. I don't have to hang out with them outside of work, but at least I have to know where they're at in their head. And I have to try to pull that out of them sometimes to try to get them back on track and ask the right questions. So it's a beautiful thing that we have legislation and protections for cancer and PTSD. And I don't think we're missing the mark on all aspects of it. I think that we're missing the mark on some, and it's a process we have to evolve through and grow with. But this job is bigger than us, no matter any way you look at it. It doesn't matter who you are. This job is probably one of the most humbling professions you can get into. And one of the most trusting professions you can get into, and appreciate it for what it is, love it for what it is, and don't take advantage of it. Don't use it as a springboard to your personal lifestyle choices. If you're not happy, move on, but don't just jump ship chasing a check. Go up, chase the vertical, get better, be better, and do your damnedest to raise up and make change where you can be impactful. That's my thought on that. My 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And, I kind of align a little bit with that. I tell people all the time, like, just my view. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing to do in your career, but if you're that unhappy where you're at, there is a department for you. You just have to know what values you have. I think a lot of people are just confused, right? Like they have this romantic vision that there's fire departments out there that go to fires every day and that's what they want to do. And they're not wrong. There are departments out there like that. And if that's what you want, then go be it. But the reality is majority of the fire service does not operate like that right now. Right.
Yeah.
So you've got to look at the next best thing. Like for me, it was my family, right? Like what do I have to do for my family? Like what benefits do I get? What pay do I get? And things like that. That's where I always looked at it first. And then my selfish wants came second.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate now that I've landed in a position where that meets everything and my fire department's values align with mine and everything else. But that's not to say that everybody's going to find that, if that makes sense, right?
No, it makes sense.
There is a time where you got to look at what do you want in your career for yourself? What is your vision? How long is it going to take you to get there? Is it even achievable? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have those real conversations. But what drives me crazy is like I'll never judge somebody for jumping ship or leaving if it's done with the best of intentions and it's what's best for them.
Totally.
But there is a lot of people that will just go from department to department to department to department to avoid doing a certain task.
Mm-hmm.
One of those being riding an ambulance or whatever it is that needs to be. And again, if that's not for you, you don't want to ride an ambulance. Well, then there are departments for you out there that you can go to and not do that and stuff like that. But I assure you, you'll probably land there and find another issue or something that you don't want to do. So you can't have something like that as an example to be the driving force of why you don't want to work somewhere. You can't. You're like you said, you're never going to get anywhere in your career. You're going to piss away 25, 30 years before you know it. You're going to be like, I feel like I did nothing. The reality is we give so much of ourselves to this profession that it's okay to want something in return.
It is. Right? It's not
okay
selfish. It's
not selfish. It's not selfish, but you're never going to get that return in investment if you don't stay and invest.
Right.
Right. And I know, I might not be the best one to say that, but I've learned a lot of things along the way, and that is one of them.
But that's why you're able to say it, Sean, because you finally found what you were looking for, not realizing it. It took you a while to get there, and it's okay. But you have been contributing every location you went to. You weren't just a stick in the mud. You weren't just pissed off about pay alone, I'm sure. Your family was a motivator. There's no way around that. Your family is your greatest motivator. They're your inspiration, okay? And it's a blessing to have a family, especially in this career, because, you know, you've got to be appreciative of the fact that they're scared every day you leave to go to work. Because, you know, just like in the world of being an officer, your next step out the door might be your last step. Well, I don't want to go that extreme in that measure. I'm just saying the reality of this is you learned, you moved forward, you've evolved, and now you can impart that wisdom back to those who might be sitting in the position right now saying, fuck, I hate this department. I just don't want to come to work today. I just got to find one more step to the next best thing. Instead of saying, well, shit, maybe the next best thing isn't what I need. Maybe I just need to invest in myself and do something different and see if it works. Take those steps, do something better. And if it's not meant to be, then it's not meant to be, but at least you can say you tried before you jump ship.
Yeah. And I guess my point behind that is if that is your position, look at what you can accomplish during your transitions, right?
Right.
Hey, okay, I'm here. Maybe this isn't the place for me, but what can I do while I'm here to make this worthwhile, right? What classes can I take? What can, whatever that is. But the ultimate deciding factor is if you're that person that has been 4, 5, 6 different fire departments, whatever that number is for you, and you keep running into the same issues, maybe you're the fucking problem.
Oh, totally.
You got to look internally and realize like it's not the fire service that's doing this to you, it's yourself. So fix yourself, right? Yeah. And then maybe you can have a good career.
Kind of an interesting concept. Pretty simple when you think about it.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, that's it, man. I mean, what are we doing to invest? And that's, I guess, I know I went on a little bit of a rant there, but at the end of the day, like, I mean, what are we doing to be successful? And I always look at the stuff. It's always interesting to me that pay is never in the top 5 of issues people leave departments. Like almost never. Like seriously. I mean, how many times do you see guys leave because they want to, either they want to expand their wings, they want to go someplace where they feel like they grow more, or maybe they don't feel appreciated or whatever. Like there's so many things that pay is very seldom the sole contributing factor. Not saying it never happens, because it does. There certainly are those issues out there, but pay routinely doesn't make the top 5 reasons people leave. And I think that's what I'm getting at is like, what are we doing to invest in our organizations, right? What are we doing to invest in ourselves, in our people, in our organizations, to make people want to come into our family? Because that's how we should view our departments. They should be a part of our family. We spend a lot of time with them, right? That's the part, the human aspect of the job is what I think we need to focus on more. And whether it's, mental health, keeping tabs on our people, whether it's investing in training, quality training where they feel like they're gaining value out of it, whether it's having them over for a cookout on Saturday, having the guys over, things like that, that used to be a little more commonplace. I think sometimes we lose sight of that. We lose sight of the human aspect sometimes, and we get caught up in thinking about pay and benefits and the tangibles, the stuff we can put on a piece of paper and manage. And the reality of it is guys just want to come to the job and feel valued. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And, a lot of people are just looking for that fit, the feeling of, hey, I belong here. Like I'm contributing, but at the same time we have to, flip the script and look and say, hey, if that's not the case where you're at, what are you doing to fix that? What are you doing to invest in the people around you? What are you doing to invest in the organization? If you want to see people come and stay, then don't treat them like crap when they come through the door. Take the time to mentor them. Take the time to teach them. Don't get caught up in the negativity, right? Don't get caught up in the banter about all the stuff that you can't change, right? Focus on the stuff you can change. And I think that was the whole point I was trying to make with the rant was, what are we doing to bring people in? People that want to be firefighters, that want to do the job. What are we doing to keep them? And a lot of that comes down to stuff that's not even necessarily a ton of money. A lot of it is mindset, it's attitude, it's the way we approach and treat those people when they come in the door. And that's, at the end of the day, again, if that's not the situation for where you're at, ask yourself, A, if it's not for you, maybe you need to go somewhere else, or B, maybe you just realize like, hey, this, maybe I need to take more time to invest in my fire department and to make it better. And here's the thing, like at the end of the day, you do what's best for you and your family, but understand that, like you said, sometimes you just gotta get tough. I mean, kind of just anchor down and say, hey, this is it. This is where I'm digging in here, and I'm here for the long haul, and play the long game, and realize that, you're not going to change anything overnight. If there's issues, which there are in every fire department, it takes you get a lot more traction with the teamwork. If it's just you by yourself trying to do something, right, you're never going to really achieve as much as you could as if you got, work collaboratively together with other people to drive change. And that means you have to build relationships. You have to invest in people. And if you don't, you're never going to get as far by yourself as you would with a team. And that's just all there is to it. And I think that's the part that's missing, though, is like, we have to build that team, that family, that culture of, we want excellence in the streets, right? For them, that starts in the firehouse. It starts with each one of our attitude coming into the job, and it starts with each of us as guys that have been here for a few years, in the fire service, to invest in the people coming in the door and teach them those values, because those values used to be instilled, right? That's them first mindset used to be instilled. That family first mindset used to be instilled. We get back to that. We absolutely can, and we should get back to that in the fire service if we truly want to make it better. And
I think it exists, Nick. I just don't think it's as widely distributed to the masses as it could be. I think that when you hear nothing but negatives, you don't look for the positives.
Yeah.
All right. So to be fair, I will say that even in departments that struggle, there's definitely growth and cultural benefit there. And then there are some departments that just don't have the foundation and the support mechanism for culture and growth. Okay. There's two sides to this. So, I mean, even when the going gets tough and no department is free from adversity, you have to accept the fact that, again, going back to the concept of you're the one watering your own grass. Yeah, the department hired you, but it's up to you to, with the support and the ability to ask questions and seek guidance, to fertilize your grass and grow. And that's it. I mean, it really does come down to the individual. And yes, there has to be support there. You just have to know where that support is. And I think sometimes we do a piss poor job in sharing that access to that support. And that's where we need to improve. I think that some departments get a bad rap for no reason. It's like the hospitals in my area. You go to any one home and they'll tell you they don't want to go here versus there because the care is horrible there, but they want to go there, and they've heard horror stories about people dying in that hospital, and how dare they? Well, where did you hear that from? Well, my neighbor 2 doors down who died 3 years ago said that after he got out of that hospital and died as soon as he came home. I went to check on him, and oh my gosh, come on, let's be real. No place is perfect. You just have to make it better. And that's what we need to circle back to. It's really not, admin couldn't do the job without us. Let's just say that. I think that's a fair point. Because we're the soldiers and we're the foot soldiers. We got the generals up top, and then you got your standard issue men and women and your lieutenants and whatnot at the cavalry level or brigade level leading the charge. And it does require a certain level of appreciation for all sides of it. Maybe not in a direct knowledge wise, but at least an appreciation that, you can take some bad and make it good just by simply utilizing the right kind of influence. That's just my thought at the end of this. Influence matters, and influence can be very impactful, both negative and positively. And influence is where we have what we have as a corps, as officers, as soldiers. We have that influence, and people often forget that too. We just need to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yeah, our influence stems from, our attitude and our preparation and the way we approach the job. At the end of the day, it's consistency. It's being willing to put in the work over and over again for, sometimes years and years and years before you ever see any kind of turning point, if you will. And I think that's what we got to, realize is like, if I don't think you're ever going to find a utopia fire department out there,
they don't exist,
and they don't exist. Right. And so what are you doing to make where you're at better? And if where you're at is, it doesn't align with your values, or you don't feel like you're being appreciated or whatever, like, fine, go find someplace that does. but then go all in, and realize it takes time. Be in a place where your family's taken care of, where you have mental peace and happiness, and understand you're never going to have it perfect. It's never going to be like you're always going to have stressors, but the point is, like, get in a place where you want to be, right? And realize it's not going to be perfect. It's going to take time and effort and work to change the things that are, there's always good things and bad things wherever you go, right? And I think if we, like you said, we focus too much on the negative sometimes, and we just need to take it. Our approach needs to change, and our attitude towards it needs to be changed if we're going to make an influence, or have influence rather, and make a difference. And that is ultimately when it comes down to, is the only thing we can control every single day is showing up with a good attitude, right? And how we prepare and how we conduct ourselves. That's our performance is the only thing we truly can fix. And whether that's, an attitude thing or mindset or a skill set or whatever it is, like we can bring other people along and try to influence them and try to get them to be better. But if we're not investing in ourselves, right, and we're not setting the example ourselves, then we're going to have a really hard road to hoe of influencing any other change in our organization if we're not doing our own things to improve on our end. If we're not taking time to be better ourselves, then we can't ask other people to be better. We can't ask other people to have a good attitude if we don't have a good attitude. We can't ask other people to give more if we don't give more. And I think that's what it comes down to, is like, control what you can control, have the right attitude, approach the job with a mindset of, hey, I want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that's really, it sums it up, right? That's basically what we're saying here is, invest in the long run, invest in your organization over time, and, and invest in yourself, invest in the people next to you, control what you can control, and don't worry about the stuff you cannot control. At the end of the day, you hope that people listen, you hope that your influence has an effect. But it's the only way that's going to happen is if you build relationships and you build credibility through your performance and consistency over time.
Well, performance is everything, but actions, definitely speak louder than words in this circumstance. Yeah. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I can contradict a few things here that I said a moment ago, but I'm not doing it in the sense where I'm wrong in my thought process. I'm going to just say this. Again, we're problem solvers. That's our job. But if we're going to run away from the bigger problems, then why are we even bothering? Okay. If we're going to run away every time the going gets tough, then we're failing our mission. And so we can't fix the department's problems. But again, this goes back to the greater discussion, is we can certainly control as best we can the environment around us immediately, and then at least make every effort to do better. And that's what I think matters. And if we can just, again, get across to the company officers, the senior firefighters, the engineers, the captains, whatever, you are the voice. You are technically their leader. You field their concerns and questions and thoughts, but you are also the one that speaks for them. And you're also the one that protects and represents them. So that's important. So they can grow, they can succeed, and they can see what it's like to face problems head on and not run away from them because it doesn't fit your narrative. Because there is no such thing as fitting your narrative, in a sense, when you're going into a burning building per se, because you only have one narrative. That is getting in there and getting the job done. You just can't lollygag around it and perform poorly and expect the outcome to be good. You have to be deliberate and direct.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've really, we had a good conversation here. I think it's really, in closing, I think it really, when it comes down to it, you kind of summed it up perfectly. And we have to do better if we want to, we have to be better and do better if we want to see our organizations do and be better. And we have to invest again in people and in processes and understand it's a long drawn out process sometimes. But at the end of the day, it starts with mentoring. It starts with, creating a culture in our own little bubble, in our own circle of influence, right? It's that circle of influence. What can you affect? Make it a little bit better every day. It's that 1% better every day thing, right? It's not this monumental sweeping change. It's that incremental process of being better and doing better. And, at the end of the day, that's basically it in a nutshell. It's been a really good conversation with that.
Is it time for the flogging?
It is time for the flogging.
It's time for the flogging. All right, hold on.
Yeah, he's got to get his gullet
down the hatch.
Down the hatch. So
okay,
yeah,
we're there.
6 questions, 60 seconds.
Shit. I can't count 6.
And it's going to be rapid fire, and we believe in you.
A, B, C, C, D.
Channel the inner mustache. You know,
so you're going the mustache.
There we go.
You got my heart rate going, and now I got to sit here and focus on. Okay, cool. No, I'm up for the challenge. Let's fucking do it. Let's go. Even if I sound stupid, we're doing this. It's hardcore. Let's go.
All right,
full send.
You ready?
Oh, whatever.
It's not that bad. Don't stop sweating.
Whiskey over beer. How about that?
All right. So we talked a lot about a lot of different issues. So I'm going to kind of take a turn real quick. I want to talk about training. So here we go. What is your favorite training drill?
What is my favorite training drill? This is going to sound silly, but I'm kind of a pump geek, and I don't mind stretching line. I don't mind doing training or RIT stuff. I mean, because it's fucking important. You got to know that shit, and you got to be good at it. But I love this. Again, sounds crazy. I love turbo drafting. I just love getting new recruits out there and throwing that thing in a lake or in a canal. And I just love getting the recruits out there. And I also love pump training on multi-lines and making them think critically at that pump and creating failure points for them to learn from and just stretching it out to a point where they're freaked the hell out and they don't know what's coming next, but it's going to happen and they got to fix the problem. Because I can tell you, when I first touched a pump, I was horrible at it. And now I'm the lead for the pump ops program, 15 years later in my department, but that's just me. I love that. I love doing that kind of training, but I will do any training you throw at me.
Good. Well, there's a lesson to be learned in there, right?
I would imagine. Yeah.
As long as you put your mind to it and you're willing to learn, you become good at anything. Right. So, here we go. Second question. Coming kind of back to the right. Yeah. Congratulations. You made it.
Yay. I get a gold star or a ribbon. How about that?
Yeah. Hey, whichever you choose, man.
Let's do it.
What would your advice be if you have one piece of advice that you can give to those who want to promote? They're at that point in their career. What would that piece of advice be?
Ask yourself why.
It's good.
So that's it. Just ask yourself why. And I think that question will answer itself. And then if you want to put a part 2 in that, what are you expecting to accomplish? How about that?
I like it. No, those are good. Those are all fair questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of asked the third one already in the beginning when it came to training new firefighters. So I'm going to kind of switch that up a little bit, right?
Okay.
What do you think is the greatest challenge facing recruitment and retention today?
Greatest challenge facing recruitment and retention today. Let me see. It's not for a lack of students going in. I think it's a lack of engagement with the schools teaching these firefighters. I think we find that if we don't put our face out there, they might not know who Lake County is, but they'll know who Orange County is. They'll know who Orlando is. They'll even know who Marion is, who has an excellent mentorship program in that community. I live in Marion, and I'm going to tell you right now, they have some of the finest processes to get people hired on, and yet they're short a lot of people at this point, but they have a mentorship program that literally opens the door up for young men and women to walk through the door and experience the fire service, and then hopefully lead them into fire school. And now they're doing no certification recruitment and putting them through standards up at Ocala. So I think exposure is where we're failing in recruitment.
Good. Yeah. Like I said, see, these are all your opinions, and that's what we ask them. I think those are all great points, and I hope that whoever's listening today can take something out of those. So thank you for answering those. I'm going to turn it over to Nick, and he's going to finish it up.
Go ahead, Nick. I'm looking at you now. May not look like it. I'm staring you in the. I'm looking in the eye sockets of your soul, Nick. Okay, so make this good.
All right, here we go. Mine are way easier, so no sweat. Favorite.
Why are you sweating then?
I've been watching Cops all afternoon, so.
Oh dear God.
Yeah, that's actually it's playing in the background. If you see me looking in the distance,
all I heard was favorite position, and I almost opened my mouth on that one. But I'm gonna step back and let you finish it.
That's bullshit, Nick. Cops doesn't come on really till 4, and it's only 4:35, so you can't play all afternoon.
Well, I'm a Cops fan. Don't get me wrong. It's good. All right. Come on, Nick. You're multitasking.
Busted,
Let's go.
Busted. All right. Favorite position on the fire ground?
That's a tough one.
One job.
Damn it. I'm going to say command.
Wow.
I love putting the pieces of the puzzle together. I love coordinating the effort. I love when I get that opportunity. And second to that, and it's not even really a second, it's going in the door with a line and doing that work, just doing it. There's nothing. But command would have to be my first. I love being able to coordinate an effort and lead people. I love that. Even if I'm not great at it some days, I love being able to do that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was honestly that's the first one that Fed answered like that. So kudos to you for being different. I like it.
It's just the
like
way it is.
Yeah, you're the orchestrator. I like it. So I still think that being on the line is at least where I'm at right now. That's my go-to place I want to be. But as you know, hey,
I won't argue with you on that. I won't argue with you on that, obviously. But I had to pick one or the two, and
yeah, no, I feel you.
It's just what it is.
I'm just glad you didn't say something about being on the truck or cutting a hole in the roof and look down at the engine, because that would have really. It would have taken some salt out of your stash. I'm not going to lie.
Let's be honest here, okay? In 20 plus years, I don't think I've ever ventilated but one roof in my entire career. So let's just call it what it is, okay? It's just what it is.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
All right. So second question. Most influential professional influence in your career?
Most influential.
Well, the person who influenced you the most, the best, most impactful person, mentor, leader that had the biggest impact in your fire service career?
Early on, Paul Bateman, my old captain from Putnam. He was probably one of the most influential rivals, challengers, leaders, manipulators in a good way. He could literally solve any problem and then could dress you down and put you back up where you need to be as well. And I mean, field dress you and then reset you and get you back on track. Okay. I'm going to say Paul Bateman from Putnam County, because he was just a very influential person in my life. Taught me a lot about dealing with conflict and adversity and facing challenge.
Nice. So last question. You ready?
Oh shit. It's a doozy.
Oh, this is easy, especially because I know you're a reader. So, favorite fire service book?
Favorite fire service book? You know, I that's a tough one. I'm going to say 401 Things Firefighters Can Teach New Firefighters by Chief Gary Ludwig. It is a compilation of amazing concepts from different professionals out there in our career. And I had the chance to, become friends with him and get to know him through this time of being able to put him on my show and read his books. It's a great book. It's not like a chapter by chapter read per se in that sense. It's snippets from individual people, including himself, over the career path that they've led. And it just lends some insight to how things are done, maybe insight you never even thought of. And that probably is one of my favorite books to go back to.
Nice. Well, see, you survived. Rapid fire is complete. You didn't twist your mustache off. You're not sweating too bad that I can tell.
You have no idea what my feet are doing right now. They're swinging violently. I'm like, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. It's good. Okay, I'm done. No, I think those are great questions. And you're going to get the honesty out of that. There's no other way to give the answers to those questions. And if it doesn't meet the norm for some, well, too bad. I mean, that's just who I am.
Yeah, we're all about it. We like to keep it organic as much as possible. And so, I know some shows may let people preview the questions ahead of time, but I feel like we're all honest answers. That's where it's at, man. So
what's the fun in that?
Yeah, it's no fun. So, it's who you are. And that's the beautiful thing about having a podcast is you can do it however you want to do it. So
yeah, I know. Trust me. I've been down that road.
I know, right? Like
yeah, Canada North.
Hey, speaking of Canada, it feels like Canada here today. I just want to throw that out there. It snowed
doesn't-
a couple inches last night. It's white stuff falling out of the sky right now. So for anybody that's not experiencing that, kudos to you for actually having spring.
If I could show you the sun glistening on my lake right now, I would. It's probably 86, 87 degrees right now, and the humidity's, I don't know, wherever it is. It's Florida. It's humid. It is what it is, but it's beautiful outside right now here. So
way to rub it in, Jason.
There you go. You're welcome.
Appreciate you, buddy.
You're welcome. But you mentioned it, and you opened the door. Opportunity knocks, and you got to take it.
Dude, listen, this is how bipolar. You think Florida's bipolar? All right. It was 88 degrees earlier yesterday, and now it's like in the 40s and snowing. So there you go. That's Michigan for you.
How many layers are you wearing, Scrawny McScrum butt?
Just one, because I'm inside. So this is my typical everyday layer, even when I'm at work.
Are you wearing pants?
Are you wearing a hoodie?
Are you wearing pants though? I'm just curious, because if you're not, I understand.
Well, okay. I'm gonna be completely honest right now. I'm wearing pajama pants.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
So
I'm wearing shorts. I'm good there,
I'm wearing fuzzy Croc slippers right now. So
I believe it.
I've got the just below the ankle socks on right now, like the kind you put on when you test drive some shoes at the shoe store. Go figure. But I'll tell you what, for working out, these are actually kind of nice in my shoes. They feel great.
There you go. There you go.
So our listeners got the bonus of knowing what we're wearing. You're welcome.
Stay tuned for next week's wardrobe.
I mean, who wore it best is all I'm going to say if you want to put it out there. And, I got the better mustache.
That's a dangerous game.
I got the better mustache. That's all I'm going to say.
Jason, brother.
I got the better mullet. So
thank you for coming on the show, man.
Anytime, brother.
Certainly appreciate it. Sean does have the best mullet. I'll throw that out there. And your mustache looks glorious as ever.
Level.
So I have neither of those going on right now. But I'll come up with something unique next time we get together.
You've got the start of a goatee starter kick going on there, or you haven't shaved for a couple of weeks. I'm not sure yet.
A couple days.
Okay.
I had to get a picture for the DMV, but that was a bad one earlier. I won't even show you that picture because I'm actually embarrassed even by DMV standards. So,
oh God, that's deep. Okay, do you need to talk? Do you need to talk outside of the show? Because we can have that.
Yeah, I may need therapy after that DMV experience. But
I'm breaking out the pad. I'll start writing things down, and I'll rapid fire you on this. Okay. Thanks for having me, guys. And you know what? We'll do this on my side of the fence here real soon. And I'm sorry that circumstances and what was the word you used that day? It was non-consensual. Yeah, that sucked. And then when you rang me up and you're like, "Can we go today?" I'm like, oh, Jesus, it's Monday. I just came off of a double and I got all this crap to do right off the get-go. But you know what? I'm not going to let Sean and Nick down. I want to do this. So here I am, and I'm glad you had me on. So we'll flip this over and do it on the Can Man side.
Oh yeah, brother.
Sounds good, brother. Well, thanks for sharing just shy of 2.5 hours of your time with us. I greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, fellas. Catch you on the flip side. See you, boys.
See ya.